All right. As I said, the way I usually introduce myself before the screen goes, there it is. Then I took this to Brackenridge Park because I took it for the trees. I love the roots, but you can see the various layers. I always introduce myself, as I'm part of the Speaker Bureau, as a Texas A&M University AgriLife Extension Certified Master Gardener. To say we're a Master Gardener is kind of an audacious, bodacious claim, because that means you're familiar with everything: soils, ornamental, turf, trees. You understand all things vegetables. You understand plant pathology. You understand plant propagation, the entirety of all of it. And so technically we are extension certified. They set out the requirements and we meet those requirements, and then we keep our credentials through our volunteer and our education. I just got interested in soils, and I one of the joys of being obsessive, you stare the daylights out of stuff. And so I'm going to take y'all on kind of a long journey here on everything soils. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. That means I didn't do my job. But anyway, let's take a look at the soils of this area. This is really a fascinating area where we live in. Bexar County, Comal County, Guadalupe County. This is a fascinating spot as far as soils. Two things. If you remember chapter 2 in your book, have y'all read chapter 2 yet? Yeah. You studied it. The main thing is that's earth-kind landscaping, earth-kind gardening. That's what we support. The phrase came from the wife of Dr. Steve George, who's one of the giants in Texas horticulture. And back when I moved to Texas back in the 1850s, 1960s, basically what everybody did is they tried to bring where they were here. So my parents are from Indiana. My mother tried to recreate her Indiana garden in South Texas. I was talking to a lady at church Sunday, and she's from North Dakota, and she keeps trying to recreate her peonies in South Texas, and she's having a hard time doing that. We have people insist on trying to grow azaleas. Well, you can grow them, they're just not going to do anything, because you can't change our soil texture. It's either going to be around here, it's going to be clay, and sort of I-10 is the dividing line, give or take, and then south it can be almost anything you got, and I'll show you a map about how and why. And it's just not practical to change our soil pH. People say, well, I'll just add some more peat moss to my soil. I don't care what you add to it. We're promoting earth-kind gardening, and the amount of acidity you'd have to add to grow some of these things just is not practical, and it violates while we're trying to work with the soil that we have. We're not trying to change it. And I'll show you sort of the silliness behind that. So here we go. Those two things are given in soils in South Texas. So there's the Earth's evolution. This is not in your handouts because there was too many slides. Let me take you on a little picture tour. I think is in here. Let me see. It's not practical to change that. Okay, soil. Maybe it's not there. All right. There are four components to this soil: air, water, organic material, and mineral. It's about half of it is pore space, which is air and water. Half of it is more or less some sort of mineral or organic material. Technically, organic material is not part of it, but I put it in there anyway. If you want to if we work on your master's degree at A&M, you will not say organic material is part of the soil. That's all right. The mineral is the parent material. Our parent material is primarily, this area is going to be clay. And that's because millions of years ago, this is all underwater. And the plankton that were floating around died, fell to the bottom, and over the years they just formed, that calcium formed our very calcareous clay soil. It's taken millions of years to get there, and you can't change it because you want to grow peonies. It's been like that for years. And then in the formation of the continents, which is a fascinating thing, there was a North American plate where we are, and then there's the South American plate, and there's the African plate. The South American plate this is a theorized, I mean, it's based on some science, but it's theorized that the South American plate sort of collided with the North American plate, which is where we got the Ouachita Mountains just northwest of here, goes through San Antonio and affects your soil. In time, those sort of eroded away, but it gave way to the Balcones Escarpment, which goes up I-35. Part of the soil that is made there is because of the collision of these two continents grinding against each other. That is a soil different than you're going to find northwest of San Antonio, which is the Edwards soil. It's a different color, a different type of clay. But that's different than what you're going to find just 10 miles south of here, because the collision took place up there. This is called a transition area in here. So south of us, you have virtually everything you can think of. You know, 2 miles down the road, they may have sandy soil, and 2 miles down here, they got clay soil. That's just the way this soil was formed, and I'll show you some pictures on that. But anyway, soil has air, water, in a perfect world, 25% air because the roots got to breathe, the critters and the little microbes in the soil got to breathe. They need water, organic materials, all these leaves and everything fall on the ground. And then the mineral is primarily going to be something like granite that as it dissolves, it breaks into sand, or clay, calcium that will break up into clay. So here's, for those of you who need to see a picture of it, here's what it looks like. Pore space and solid space. Okay, the mineral, what makes sand, silt, and clay really is the size of the particle. Clay tends to break down into flakes, and sand, the granite tends to break down into sand. That's just the way it weathers. And I have some maps up here trying to explain that to y'all. All right, so here is the ideal. 25 air, 25% water, mineral, whatever that mineral may be. It may give birth to sand, silt, or clay. If you have poorly drained soil, you have virtually no air, and that's when your plant's dry. If you're underwatering your plants, you're overwatering your plants, you can't tell the difference because the leaves are drooping. They either have too much water, not enough water, and they both look the same. So your plant looks droopy, and you go in there and give it more and more water. You're drowning the poor thing. There's no air for the roots to breathe. And this is a problem that we really have in our area, is this is very compacted soil. It does not drain. I ran a simulation through a couple programs, and this is accurate enough for us. If it was a PhD, I'd qualify everything. In a 1-inch rain in our clay soils, maybe 5 to 10% of it is absorbed into the soil. Everything else is runoff. That's the power of clay. It just compacts, it absorbs, it percolates so slowly because those clays are little flakes. And they won't let water pass through until every flake has its water. So the top layer of flakes is going to absorb all the water it can very slowly, and they're not going to let the water go through till they get theirs, and then the second layer of flakes get theirs, and that inch of rain has already gone by. In my yard, the front yard is heavily composted, and I'll talk about that coming up. When we had a 1-inch rain, I don't know, 20 years ago, we actually got rain. I had 4 inches of moisture in my front yard, all because I dug it up and I measured 4 inches. My backyard that I have not put compost on, I had about 1/4 of an inch of water in that soil. That's what compost does. But anyway, so this is compacted soil, and there's just the water that they just cannot permeate through that. Now sand's the exact opposite. Water runs through sand, but the problem is the plants don't get any of the nutrients. The plants that grow in sand have adapted over a long period of years to say we can grow here. The plants that grow in heavily compacted soil over the years have learned to adapt there. One of the greatest plants that grows in compacted soil is weeds. because they blow 10,000 weeds, 2 of them take, and they're right in the middle of your rose bed. So, and you can't get them out because you pull them, and those roots have gone deeply enough, they've learned how to live there. So anyway, physical properties. First off, you have the color, texture, structure, drainage, depth. Go through each one of these. Generally speaking, the darker the soil, the more organic material it has in it. The lighter, the less organic material. Red is some of the nutrients here, and I'll show you some samples in a minute. When the Europeans came here, this was all prairie. There wasn't an oak tree in sight. That was brought over here. And y'all saw those fires in California. We used to have those here. And those fires started along the Gulf Coast. This is all prairie land. It burned everything from here up to the Balcones Escarpment. It just burned it. That stuff went to the ground to form an incredibly rich organic material. So the Europeans came here and they used European farming methods, and they destroyed the soil because they ran those plows through the soil, exposed all that organic material, and it dissipated. So for all the good they tried to do, they actually kind of messed the soil up. So let's see, black, brown, red, what can I show you? All right, so this is Houston black. I guess I'll just pass around pieces of it. Y'all about to eat, get your hands dirty. You're gardeners, what do you care? All right, this is Houston black. It's a very thick, heavy gumbo clay soil. The clay in it, if you're ever on Jeopardy, it's called smectite. Smectite clay is basically, this is very, very elementary, but it's accurate. It has three layers in it. And when water gets in here, it swells up. And when the water dries out, it shrinks down, which is why we have the swell shrink problem in some places. It's especially a problem in the real rich neighborhoods of San Antonio, because they live right in the middle of San Antonio, and they have that soil real bad, and the foundations just are absolute total chaos. All right, what else do we have? Well, we have, this is from straight South San Antonio. Now you can try to tell me how much black you think is in this, and that'll tell you how much organic material is in here. Down 37 used to be a place called the Olive Orchard. Some of y'all remember that place. It used to exist. Sandy Oaks Olive Orchard. Well, I was out there, and one time we had our association men out there, and I asked her if I could take a sample of her soil. She said, sure. She didn't know I was going to take the whole bag. That's beside the point. But we had beach sand on 37. Absolutely beautiful beach sand. There's no organic material in there. So that's going to be kind of a challenge to grow in. If you go 10 miles due west, you are going to find Somerset, Texas. 10 miles, reddish soil. It's a Texas clay pan soil. And you have some of that around here. Clay pan means on top you'll have nice, good, red, sandy soil, but on the bottom is a pan of clay. All right, so we talked about, you don't see the picture anymore, we talked about clay. Absorbs water very slowly. So Dr. Larry Stein, who's one of the geniuses in our A&M program today, was talking about working with a pecan grower who has soil like that. His pecan trees were dying. He couldn't figure out why. He has this good, red, sandy soil. It should be working quite well. Well, we had a lot of rain that year. So the rain filters through that sandy soil, hits that clay, and it turns it into a bowl. And remember that one picture where there's no air, those trees were dying because they were drowning because it hit that clay pan. That's important for us to know as master gardeners, because we're trying to help people figure out, why are my trees growing? How come this isn't happening? Well, what kind of soil you got? Yes?
Did you say it turns it into a bowl?
It functions sort of like, it's a pan.
Okay, so it holds the water.
It holds the water, and it filtrates very slowly. So it goes through the sand, the trees it hits that clay, and the clay says, I'm not in a hurry. I'm going to drain as slow as I want to. All right, so you have some sample. What else do I have over here? I brought you all sorts of goodies. The rivers and the lakes have a different type of texture. It's very gravelly, and it's a hodgepodge of everything because it washes off the hillside, gets caught in the rivers and the creek beds, and it's a very gravelly soil. It's not worth much, but it's in the rivers. We don't worry about it. Let's see. This is texture. This is a caliche. Now, why do I have to care about caliche? Well, you may have it in your yard, but also, my wife and I, a number of years ago, it might have been, it was around the COVID time, before I write about it, we drove out Bandera Road to see this brand new subdivision they're putting in. And I saw this big old pile of stuff there, and I thought that was base that they're going to put on the roads or something. It was the topsoil the builder was putting in the homes for their topsoil, and he put Bermuda grass right on top of it. So what's going to happen is they're going to call their county agent, and they're going to say, why is my turf grass dying? Well, you're trying to grow it on caliche. You can work with the caliche soil, but it's got to have a lot of compost to it because that affects the texture. But you may have people ask, what do I do about caliche? Well, you add about 2 tons of compost. Structure, we can change the structure. We cannot change the texture. If it's sand, it's sand. If it's clay, it's clay. But we can change the texture, which is how the soil functions. So what we can do is, let's see, I gave a presentation to some Rose judges, and I just brought the same thing, and I thought, man, this thing weighs a ton. All right, so we can take, these are different soils, but you can get the idea. We can take this Houston Black, and we can turn it into something like this. Now this is what your plants will grow in. It's interesting because this is Edwards soil. See if I can not hurt myself. This is brownish, and this is black. It's because the organic, also because the clay content. This has a different clay to it. It has an illite or kaolinite clay. They will swell and shrink, but not as badly as this. So in this area, you can tell a lot by looking at the soil. Is it black? Is it brown? Is it red? Is it white like that beach sand? So we cannot change the texture, but we can change the structure. What I mean by that is compost, and I'll get to that. What that does is it breaks this up, and it turns it into this. That's what compost does. That's the beauty of composting, and I'll tell you more about that in a little bit after I make a mess here. All right, physical properties is how well it allows water to filtrate through, which is affected by its texture and structure. One of the things I get to do is I get to make mud pies. The kids absolutely love that when I give presentations in schools. If I take this and chop it up in little pieces and re-wet it, it's when it dries, it's going to pull away from the edge of the container because it's shrinking. The soil that has compost to it will start cracking because the compost is making the soil break up. That's the beauty of composting, which is how we can affect the structure. We can affect the texture, and the texture and the structure affect the drainage. Depth, how deep is it to bedrock? It's different here, but when I work with folks live out 281, how come I can't grow anything? Because you got about ½ inch soil. Well, what do? Do something else. You got to use raised beds, at least 6 to 8 inches. That's the only thing you can do. What do I do about my turf grass? Well, you're going to have to add about 3 or 4 inches of something on top of that because that soil's just too thin. Now, in some parts around here, this soil may be incredibly deep, which is great, unless you have Bermuda grass. Because Bermuda grass, they found it 3-4 feet deep, those roots. So you're spreading your vinegar because you want to be a good organic person. I appreciate that. and you may have killed the top, but you got 3 feet of roots down there saying, well, we'll just come back up there and replace them. Organic material is decayed animal and plants, and filtration rate is how fast the water moves. If you have 50% pore space and 50% some sort of solid, that's a great mixture, and it flows quite easily, and it gives the microbes in the soil the water and the air that they need to breathe. If you got a tablespoon and dug it up in good soil, you'll have, I think it's something like, a tablespoon, yeah, the bigger one, have like 1 billion microbes in there. And half of them haven't been named yet, or most of them haven't been named yet. So what you do as part of your Master Gardener research project, they submit for your state awards, you sit there, you count all those things. And then you name them after your favorite people. All right, so let's look at a map of the state of Texas. This is a map, United States agriculture. This gives you the different type of soils throughout Texas. This is available on the internet. Just type in something like that. And this is the Edwards. That's one kind of soil. It's going to be brown, kaolinite, illite type of clay to it. It's going to be thin. It's going to be thin because when the Rocky Mountains, this used to be underwater, when the Rocky Mountains were formed, came up, all that water washed southeast, washed that down this way. This is a heavy clay soil. Rain is more acidic, so the minute the rain hits that soil, it starts to break it up, thins it out. Then you have this blackland clay, which goes in just Medina County all the way up to North Texas. This is the Balcones escarpment. That is, what was I going to say about that? That's where it is theorized the South American continent came here and the North American continent. One thing's fascinating about that, there's that dinosaur killer comet, whatever it was, they theorized 66 million years ago. It hit right down here close to Mexico. And there's a YouTube video that shows theoretically how it worked. And the power of that water flooded from, now we're down here close to the little bay or whatever it is down here, flooded everything in South Texas up to the Balcones escarpment. All of this was underwater. That's how powerful this Balcones escarpment, this little ridge that was formed with the collision of continents, it withstood that water from that comet or asteroid. So the reason this is important, because that affects all your soils here. This area, and I have another map showing it, slowly receded, and that's why basically you have 1 or 2 colors in here, and here you have all these different ones because the water receded. As it receded, it affected the soil structure, how much sand, how much clay was there. Each one of these within these is fascinating because they have special names to them. And the way they came up with the special names, they said, well, we're next to Bob's house, so we'll call this the, yeah, so we'll call this the Bob whatever it is. So some of these things, because I thought, where do they get names like that? Well, sometimes they just name the soil after the closest town, that particular area. So you can read a lot about Texas Blackland Prairie, Texas Clay Pan, which is the area south. You can read a lot about the Gulf Coast Prairie. But if you go look up the Crockett Purvis Red classification, you're not going to find much because they just sort of made that name up to describe that area. So that's the various soils types within Texas.
Will, can I ask you?
Yes, you can.
That map that you got up there?
Yes.
Where's the best location or the perfect soil in the state of Texas?
Well, it really depends on what you're going to grow. Because, over here, the farmers learned to adapt that. When I came here down 151, they used to be the Vanderwallies farm, and they learned to work with that soil. So and they would produce all sorts of food there. So it's going to be, it depends on what you want to grow, because they grow cotton down here like no problem. So it's going to depend on what you're trying to try to grow, and because basically any of these soils work. If you amend them correctly, which we'll get into eventually. All right, so this area blown up looks like this right here. Blackland Prairie here, Texas 46 is Texas Clay Pan here. Generally speaking, the dividing line is I-10. This is called transition zone, so it's not exact, but it's close enough. But it gives you an idea of the soil you're trying to work with as you give presentations or as people ask you questions. My question always is, tell me, where in Bexar County do you live? Because San Pedro to the north and somewhere to south, we're talking different things completely. And you're also talking different growing zones. So here's specifically for you all. North of I-10, it's Blackland Prairie. It's deep-rooted prairie grasses, mountain rhyolite. This is another name for smectite clay, which is very slow. It holds the nutrients. Slow decomposition of organic material because that clay soil is very limestone, calcium carbonate, which all those little critters fell to the ground. You can't change our calcium soil. South of I-10, it's a little bit different. We're south of I-10, so generally speaking, it's going to be a reddish brown or brown because the iron-rich minerals gives it a little bit of a reddish tint. It's going to have an alkaline pH. We can't change our pH. I'll tell you why that's important. And has low organic material than other regions. And you should have that in your notes there. So the texture of the transition zone, sandstone is the same parent material, it just breaks up. Clay soils break into very fine particles, as I said before, and some of the other material, the sandstone breaks into sand. You cannot change the texture of our soils, I've said a couple times, because I can't drill that in enough, but we can change the structure. And I'm going the wrong way. Let me try that again. Okay. So, we can change it, the structure through the addition of organic material. What organic material does is a couple things. One is it feeds the microbes in the soil. And there's two ways to explain this process. There's the very adult way, which you call they eat and they excrete. If you're ever talking to kids, it's called the poop loop, and they think that's the funniest thing ever. About that time, you've lost them. You might as well give up and walk out of the room because that's all they're going to talk about. I was giving a presentation on compost, and this kid said, "My mom says it's about poop," and everybody just died laughing. It's more than that, but I'd lost them by then. It didn't make a difference what I said. But it feeds the microbes, and plus the organic material going there, it breaks up the clay soils. It reforms them. And in sandy material, it forms them into aggregates a little bit. Sand is still a little bit difficult. So when we talk about filtration rate, it's how fast the water can move through the soil. If you have it amended, it moves more easily. Here, if you amend it, it moves more easily. Depth, shallow is less than 10 inches, and you need preferably about 10 inches. So where's your best soil? If you can get 10 inches of soil, so that's a challenge for some people. They only have 5 inches of soil, or they only have an inch of soil. They're trying to grow things. Organic material holds the moisture in the sand soil better, and it helps the clay soils to drain a little bit easier. The Blackland Prairie soils typically are deep because of the organic material. The Texas Clay Pan have very poor drainage. Again, that's important for us. I kind of beat on this thing because it's extremely important to understand the soils that we're trying to work with and the soils that people will be coming to you and they're asking you, why am I having this problem? It depends on the soil that you have. Okay. Went through that. Ideally, our soils should be close to 5% organic material. Blackland Prairie varies between 2 and 5%. If you talk to anybody in Bexar County, it tends to be 0.5%, which means we have virtually no organic material. Texas clay pan, it just varies on the location. So, the organic material, it just depends on what died, where it died, how much of it died, and it had an influence on the structure of the soil. Filtration rate. Blackland prairie and Texas clay pan are slow because of the clay particles. Everything else, the sand will do a lot better. This is part of a soil presentation. I don't really like it, but I have to put it up here because it's a soil presentation. If you live out in Timberwood Park in North San Antonio, your soil horizon is about that big. Over in here, it's different, and if you enjoy researching soils, go get a shovel, dig some up. The very top layer is going to be the organic layer. The reason that's important is because sometimes lawns have issues with thatch. That's going to take place in the organic layer. Then you have A, which is the topsoil, where most of the critters are doing their thing. The soil of accumulation, we're going to worry about that. And then there's the bedrock or the parent material. I live out Bandera in 1604, and they're building a subdivision right around the corner from me, and I took a picture of it, and I may have it here. And it's that much rock. So the parent material was this big. I don't think there was a B. The A was that much, and it was very gravelly and tree roots. So what happens is the builders will put soil on there because they're required by city code to do that, and that's a problem. Not a problem. It's a challenge for you as master gardeners. I don't know what you can do about it. I'll just say it's a challenge. When builders go build a subdivision, they clean everything out because they need it flat. Well, then they bring in the cheapest soil they can find. So it may have nothing to do with your area. Years ago, I knew a gentleman that lived at 1604 and Highway 90 on the far west side of Bexar County. And he sold the top 6 feet of his soil to builders. And they came in and they took it all away. And they brought in just garbage because he was going to try to recycle it, and the whole thing, it was on the news, a disaster. But he sold 6 feet of topsoil. So you might move out here to Floresville, and you want to, well, I have the soil of Floresville. Actually, it came in from West Bexar County, and it's a really heavy clay soil. That's what the builder put there. So part of our challenge after telling you about all these places of soil is when the builders come in, you don't know what the builder put there. If somebody's building a house, if they ask you, tell them to buy well-amended soil. Well-amended soils will take the native soil, they'll add a bunch of compost to it, they'll add various minerals to it. It's a very good structured soil, and things will grow quite well. But in some places, this just doesn't exist, but it's part of a soil presentation, so I put it up there for you. More soil stuff. The soil pH, I'm sure you're all familiar with the power of hydrogen. If you don't, you can read about it in your book. The power of hydrogen affects the ability of our soils to absorb nutrients, and I have a chart for you. CEC, I coughed top of my head, I can't remember what that means. I can't remember. Cation exchange capacity, there you go. This is a crude example, but it's sort of, let's work with me. So in my day and age, as a kid, you wanted to sell some tires. So you write, you type up a letter, and it's sent to the newspaper, and you send them a check, and they put it in the one ads, and then the one ads get published, and on Sunday, that big fat paper, everybody's reading the one. Now, he sent this check in on Monday. Sunday, everybody's reading through the one ads, and you might get 3 or 4 calls on Monday, because Sundays everybody's in church. Nobody didn't play games on Sunday. So Monday evening, because Monday everybody worked, Monday evening you're getting phone calls about these tires. So you start setting up appointments for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. People come by and take a look at them. Friday, Saturday, somebody may actually buy them. That is low CEC. It takes forever to get things done. Today's world, my son is involved highly in the technology area. He has a set of tires he wants to sell. He puts them on the internet. Within 3 or 4 seconds, he's got 10 hits. He sends them a picture. Within 2 minutes, he sold them. My day and age, it took 2 weeks. Nowadays, with this stuff going like that, that's a high CEC. And the advantage of a high CEC is a plant needs zinc, takes zinc. It doesn't need magnesium, lets magnesium go. It needs some boron, it grabs it. If it doesn't need iron, it lets it go. It's that quick. A low CEC, a plant says, I need some nitrogen. And the soil says, I get it. You're going to have to give me a minute. Well, it's been a week. Well, that's okay. This is South Texas time. It's coming. Well, that's not enough. I'll order some more. Just relax. You're not going anyplace. You're a plant. And so finally it comes in, and the plant says, I got to get rid of some boron. Well, I got to find somebody who wants boron, so you're going to have to hold on to it for a little bit. That's low CEC. So we want soil with a high CEC, which is what cation exchange capacity, which is what composting well-amended soil has. So it takes the plant as it grows in real time, and in about a month, your plants are going to start growing in real time because it's spring, longer days, warmer temperatures, soil's warmer, they're going to start demanding nutrients. And if you have well-amended soil, no matter where it's located, it'll have a high CEC. And it also affects the nutrient absorption. The clay soil does not absorb iron very well. And so what difference does that make? Well, you're going to go to the store, you're going to buy that $50 pound of iron, you're going to put it on your soil, and most of it's not going to be absorbed because it's the wrong iron. There are at least 3 kinds of iron for horticulture purposes. We need, if you have a high clay soil, you need this one. The initials are DEDDHA. I do not have any idea what that means. I looked it up one time, and that's way too many syllables for me. Also, our clay soils do not absorb phosphorus. What happens is because they have a high pH, when you put the phosphorus down, the soil grabs it. The plant doesn't get it. You put nitrogen, the soil grabs it. The plant doesn't get it. And the problem is one of the fertilizers we recommend is 1959. The 5 is the phosphorus. That 5 isn't going anyplace. Dr. Stein says you apply it one day, come back 5 years later, it's still there because it cannot get to the plant because our soil has a high pH. That's what all the difference all this makes. It's in the next slide here. This is some of the nutrients that plants need, ideally. So this is your slightly acidic and your slightly alkaline, and here is where a lot of our soils are. Red means it's not getting it, and that would be nitrogen. The plants struggle getting nitrogen. The plants struggle getting phosphorus. Potassium, sulfur, they can do the calcium, they're having a hard time getting. Magnesium, if you need iron, the plants are in trouble. That's what the pH, soil pH difference makes. If you want to get real technical about it, when there's less amount of water, it tends to be alkaline. If there's a lot of water, it tends to be acidic. So the areas that were underwater, like over in the Houston area where it's very wet, they tend to be acidic. Over in West Texas, they tend to be alkaline. And here are these are the various readings of it, and we tend to be over in here, which is medium to hot to very strong alkaline. So when you talk to people as master gardeners, this is why the soil pH makes a difference. We can't change our soil pH. We can affect it a little bit. So the reason it makes any difference is because here's where azaleas grow. Well, why don't my azaleas grow? Because this is what they're getting. And so if you go to East Texas, why can't some of my plants grow over there? Because this is what they want, and this is what they get. The plants here have adapted to this. That's why the Texas Superstar plants work that you'll be, if you haven't read about, you will. In your section of ornamentals, they talk about well-adapted plants. The Mexican mint marigold, the Copper Canyon daisy, they're not native to over here, but they have learned to adapt. That's why they're well adapted. You'll never find peonies over here and gardenias and water and the azaleas over here. These plants have adapted, and that's really what difference the soil pH makes. So what does it mean? All the gardening begins with the soil. We have to understand the texture that we have, clay or sandy. We have to understand that we can affect the structure. The drainage filtration rate is affected by the structure and the texture, and the availability of the minerals depends on the type of soil that we have. So that's what all that sort of comes down to, which I would have told you, you would have already been your break by now, but I had to take you through my long story. Let me see. Let me do a couple more and then we'll take a break and let y'all wake up a little bit. Water and soils. Let me go to the picture. There's gravitational water, which you put your water in the soil and it pulls it down. There is sometimes water gets so locked up in the soil that it will not let loose, and that's especially true in clay soil. And so my backyard, I told you, I had 1/4 inch. That's because as the water went through, it got locked up and it couldn't pass through. In composted soil, it goes a lot easier. And then there's the free water, which is available to water our plants. So why are my plants having a difficult time? It's an understanding of how water flows through our soil. The thicker the soil, the slower it's going to be able to filtrate through. But gravity, the first thing gravity does is going to pull all the water to the bottom, and the plants have to struggle with whatever's on top. The biggest place this makes a difference is when you buy you have potted plants. In about a month, you're going to start putting your potted plants outside. It's going to have that beautiful, rich soil. Your plants are going to love it. And by September, that soil is going to start pulling away from the edges because it's drying out. The organic material is gone. The plant's going to start suffering. And you go to water it. You put a whole 3 gallons of water in that little 6-inch plant. Why is it dying? Because the soil has hardened up and gravity's pulling water around the sides of it. You buy the little peat plants at wherever you buy them, and those things dry out. They're very difficult to rehydrate because peat moss by nature is hydrophobic. It doesn't like water. But water gets caught in the little fibers and it attracts other water. And so peat moss seems to hold water well. If you have those, and so you put your little plant in the ground there, that little dried basin of peat moss. You wonder, why did I kept watering it? Because the gravitational pull pulled it around the sides of the pot. And there is no free water on top of the water because peat moss is just going to stop it. Well, the best way to handle that is to get a bowl or a bucket and set the peat pots in there in water and forcibly rehydrate that. If nothing else, if you ever buy peat-based flowers or whatever it is, vegetables, if you can, soak them first. Get that water back into that peat moss. Rehydrate that plant as opposed to hoping that it works, because I've had that. I've planted those things and they die. I think, but I'm a master gardener. You don't die on me. Do you not see the pins that I have here? I look like some sort of decorated officer. You cannot die on me. And I learned that, well, the peat moss dried up and the gravitational water pulled it around the side, and the roots in the middle there, because I pulled them up, it's as dry as it looked like West Texas in there. So soak your peat pots beforehand. And that's also why when you plant a plant, I'm sure they've told you, you put water in there first, because then the water goes in, that all works together, then you put water on top. When Dr. Stein does his fruit tree pruning, which is at FADX Nursery every year in January. If you're interested in fruit trees, you really want to go to it. It's usually about the 3rd or 4th week of January. When he digs a hole, he fills it full of water, and then he goes on to the next project. And when that water has filtered through, he will come back, put the tree in, and then he'll water it once again. So you want to make sure that is wet, because that affects the gravitational water is holding there in a bowl. So when you put that in there, the other waters attract to it. Otherwise, the water just flows around the side and goes to the bottom someplace. All right. Yes?
So he said he fills the hole with water?
Yes.
And so you're waiting for it to dissipate?
Yes.
And then you put the tree in?
Then you put the tree in, and you put the soil back on, and then you water it again.
And with the potted plants, I thought it was dried out too, so is the answer to that to put more organic?
Oh, thank you. I didn't finish my story. My kids have that problem. All right, so in September, October, your plants are really looking difficult. What I did this past year was I dug them up. The plants will be going to be fine. Well, unless you don't do anything, they'll die on you. But you just go ahead and dig the plants up, and you just fluff the soil up. Put some compost in there. Get some fresh additional soil if you want to, and put the plant back in there. It'll be fine. The plant will be out for a little bit, but it'll do all right. But I learned that really, so I've been at this since 2017. I learned that last summer. I thought, hey, I know, let me dig these things up, and they all survived.
Now, what are you digging up?
I'm digging up roses. I dug up hibiscus. What else did I have? I dug up a variety of salvias. Everything that I had in a pot, I dug up.
And you actually took the root out of the ground?
Out of the pot, yeah. I took it out completely. And one thing I learned studying the New York Botanical Gardens is the pots that we pick, sometimes we like those really shapely pots, and they go in like this at the top. The problem is your roots are down, your roots are here, and you got a hole like that. So you're there, foot, trying to pull it out. And so the professor said, get the pots that go like that, because when you go like that, the roots are going out here, and it's going to be a challenge. So, and I actually have one of those, and I thought, forget that. So, but if the top is bigger than the bottom, then it's easy. But yeah, I pull them out, roots and all. I mean, I don't leave it laying there. I'm ready for it. So anyway, all right, let's take a little break here and get something to drink, something to eat. If it's bad enough, you can go out and get a beer and come on back, and I'll get you this. To tell them something, to get them to understand something. So if you said there's a meeting on Monday, nobody's going to show up. You have to tell them, you have to tell them again, you have to put in the announcements, you have to put in a bulletin, you have to have a newsletter. Say it 7 times, so I tend to be redundant because this is fundamental. If we don't grasp texture, we can't change that. If we don't grasp the pH, we can't change that, then we are going to be really ineffective for the public. One thing we can change is the structure, and that is through compost, which I'm going to get to. So the answer to everything is compost. How do I improve? What can I do about my roses? Compost. What can I do about my tomatoes? Compost. What do I do about my spouse? Compost. My kids don't listen to me. Compost. It's really that simple. So I took this picture out in the Greenbelt, Leon Creek, back in my foolish days when I was a child in my 50s. I used to ride my road bike. This is a rock. It's about that big around. There's a tree growing in it. It'll grow any place if the conditions are right. And somehow an acorn found itself in a deep enough hole. There's enough organic material in there, and that acorn grew. And what's going to happen is the roots are going to break. Now, this is about the best looking piece of clay you can find. The roots are going to go through that, and it's going to break that soil up into fine clay particles. All right, so anyway, the granite sandstone tends to be sandy, shale, slate, finer rocks are going to be silty. We don't have much silt around here. Limestone, chalk, marl, dolomite are going to be our clay soils. The parent material is weathered by cold temperatures. When it got like, I don't know how cold, and we had those freezes, we have a new pastor at our church. They're from Montana. And I said, our thermometer goes down to 30, and if we go below 30, it says, don't ask. So if it's below that, what's the temperature? Don't ask. That's all you have to know. Well, that's cold temperatures, and those rocks crack under that cold temperature. If it's too hot, which will start in about 2 days and go until sometime around Thanksgiving, that heat cracks rocks. That clay starts to break into smaller pieces. Gravity, you have rocks falling to the ground. As it falls to the ground, it shatters and becomes sand, silt, and clay. Most of ours becomes clay. Rain dissolves this rock into really fine particles. It becomes clay. And then nature itself, this tree growing in here. Around the corner of my house where I've got this much limestone, you can go over there and you just kind of start flaking it off and it'll just turn into soil for you. Not very good soil. So the parent material is what makes the difference whether you have sand or clay. This is a chart that you'll see in your book. Basically, the only thing that's important for me in here is out of this big old pyramid, everything above here says clay. This is the power of clay. If you have as much as 5% smectite clay in your soil, it will affect the other 95%. That's how powerful smectite clay is. It absorbs water. It starts to form these clumps and nothing can get through. At the bottom you have your silt and your loam, and this thing here, it's a nice little chart. Basically for us, everything up here is clay based. All right. So basically, and this is kind of a little bit more redundant. Sand drains, silt absorbs, clay absorbs, and the organic material affects the way these things work. So organic material is going to help clay break up into smaller pieces. It will actually help sand to form pieces. So that's the significance of clay soil. We talked about soil pH, and here are some maps I want to show you. This is why you really can't change your 30 by 30 lawn. This is limestone. This is not limestone. And down here, you're going to change your 30 by 30 foot lot. You're going to make it acidic because you want to grow azaleas. Everybody around you is alkaline. Well, they're going to change your 30 by 30. We're trying to do earth-kind gardening, chapter 2 out of your book. There is no way the entire western part of the United States is going to let you have a 30 by 30 foot alkaline soil, because your neighbor's soil is going to leach into your soil. The water that when it comes to the ground, coming out of the aquifers, is going to be alkaline soil. Same thing over here. These people have more acidic. They can't grow some things that we do over here. That's part of it. The second part is it's dry. Where it is dry, it tends to be alkaline. You can't make more rain. We're running out of water. These people have too much rain sometimes, but that's all right. So there's one of the maps. Here's another map I came across. These people gave me permission to use it. This is rainfall. This is not very much rainfall. It's going to be high pH. It's going to be clay soils, alkaline. This is going to be a higher pH. This is going to be more acidic. You can't change your little corner right here because you have the entire middle part of the country fighting against it. Basically, this soil is going to all be the same going up there. And the point of these maps is to dramatize when somebody says, well, I'll change my area. That's what you're fighting against. That's nature you're fighting against. Specifically in Texas, dry to wet, virtually no rain over here. You get a little bit more rain. We average about 33 inches of rain in this area. We have not hit the average except, I think, twice in the last 20 years. We had 9 inches of rain a few years back. We had 11 inches of rain a few years back. I'm not real good at math, so I'll let you smarter people figure out 9 to get to 33. How much rain do we have to get from 9 to 33? We have only hit the average 3 years, and we did not hit the average last year. We started off good, but when it dried, it dried. And so what does that make any difference? You are going to be educating the public. So they're going to say, you are a master gardener, what happened to my tree? Last spring, it was wet. Moderate temperatures, the rains came, it was beautiful. The tree said, we're going to grow, we're going to put out leaves, we're going to photosynthesize, we're going to respire, we're going to transpire, we're going to translocate, and we're going to be healthy. And then all of a sudden, the heat came and the rain stopped. And the tree said, I don't need all these leaves, I'm getting rid of them. How come my tree's getting rid of its leaves so early? How come my tree seems to be dying? Well, is it a pathogen problem? Do I have oak wilt? Well, you have an ash tree, so you don't have oak wilt. Am I overwatering? Am I underwatering? What happened is the climate change. That stuff right here, we haven't hit our averages. And so remember we had that 15 feet of snow, we didn't have electricity for a couple months. Well, the effect on the trees, we're seeing some of it now because those trees were not used to it. And I was on a Zoom call with some arborists, and the theory was the native Texas trees were the ones suffering. The trees that were brought in from Virginia survived. Well, let's look at climate. The Texas trees say, we're not used to 15 feet of snow. We're not used to 10 degrees for 2 weeks. The Virginia tree said, that's a mild winter for us. And so the theory was, and this some of the guys with all the initials after the name, was the trees that were imported in from up north survived our weather a little differently. But then all of a sudden, we had last year, 2 years ago, we had 60 days of 100-degree temperatures. Those trees, Virginia said, we ain't doing this. So anyway, the average rainfall here, I'm getting off topic, is 30 inches. We haven't gotten 30 inches of rain on an average for a long time. And the truth is, we don't have enough water in the state of Texas for the future. And we're trying to figure out what to do with that. And we don't have good answers. And we keep moving people down here. We keep bringing businesses down here. And water is a real problem for us. So anyway, this affects the soil that we have. It's going to be a little bit more acidic over here because the water is washing out I think it's the hydrogen ions or hydroxide ions, I can't remember. It leaches certain ions and it makes it more acidic. And this one, it does not leach out certain ions and it makes it more alkaline. So here's another map. For those of you that are still with me on maps, I just like this. It's called BONAP, B-O-N-A-P. And I can't remember exactly what that means. Shrink swell capacity. You can kind of see where we live. It's that purple area. And that purple area is the Balcones Escarpment. That purple area is where you had those two continents collide. North American plate, South American plate. They think the African plate over here formed the Appalachian Mountains. So, but this is, you can't change that. I mean, you got your little 30 by 30 foot lot, and it goes all the way up there to Oklahoma, and you think you're going to change that. Only thing we can do is we can amend it, and the answer to all your marital problems is compost. All right, specific to us, this is a cool map I came across. I really enjoyed. This is and I'm not going to get into politics about global warming. It doesn't make a difference if you believe it. If it's happening, it's going to happen, whether or not you believe it. If it's not happening, it doesn't make a difference either. But this is history. This is history. This is the Texas coastline. We had an ice age 18 to 35,000 years ago. And when we had an ice age, let me try to get this right. More or less, this was the coastline of Texas. When the ice age came to an end and all that water was released, this was the coastline of Texas. All that flooded. So when George Strait was close, he said, I have an oceanfront property. It should have been in Seguin, Texas. But he said, Phoenix, Arizona, I don't know why. But at one time, yeah, this would have been oceanfront property. And there's a concern because some of the cities on the coastlines, they are underwater. And they're concerned about some of these glaciers melting. Well, they are melting, whether or not you want to believe it. But here in history, have we been here before? Yeah, this is the Texas coastline, and this is what happened when the Ice Age came to an end. It flooded all that. It took a while for the coastline to reform, but this is the coastlines throughout the history of the development of the North American continent. All right, let's take another look at another map. I got maps all over the place. This is from the Land Resource. This relabels the area. This is going to be, again, your Edwards Plateau. This is your Blackland Prairie. They'll call this the Gulf Coast Plain, so some will consider this the Gulf Coast Plain. Some will call it Texas Clay Pan. Depends who's making the map for what reason. South Texas Plain. And so if you want to study soils, you go to a map like this, and you type all these things in your search engine. It'll take you all over the place. What you can do when you become familiar with it is you can use the artificial intelligence, the ChatGPT and Gemini. They're relatively accurate, but you can still catch mistakes, and you tell them, and they'll say, I'm sorry, I don't have a full database yet, but they'll make the correction. But they'll give you a lot of information about this stuff. They'll tell you more than you want to know. The neat thing about it is you don't feel silly asking a question because it doesn't care. And you can sit there and go to the minutia of every detail. But so those are becoming more and more helpful. If you want to find out anything, really the place to go to is Texas A&M University because they do our research here. So here's a really pretty colorful map that I was talking about in the first half of the presentation. You look at the colors. This is the Edwards Plateau. Basically, it's greenish. There you have your Blackland Prairie, but look over here, different color, different color, different color, different. As the state of Texas was being formed and the water receded, is that right? Yeah. The soils became a little bit different, and the soils were made of whatever was around. Was there a volcano exploding over here, and the water and it ended up over here? Was there an underground volcano that happened to erupt during the formation of some of these things? What was going on geologically in the history of Texas that these are all so different, and you can each one of these. I took off the answers, but they're all labeled, and they'll give you the time in history that these were formed. So the most recent soils in Texas are going to be along the coastline. The oldest soils in Texas are going to be up here. It's called the Llano Uplift at Chandler Rock State Park. Those are considered like 2 or 3 billion years old. This is just thousands of years old. And so we have everything right here. But see, to me, is why soil is so fascinating for our part of the state, our part of the country, is because we're right in here. We have a medium green, light green. We have this little tan-colored, polka dotty thing, striped thing, all these soils within our area. And so people say, what's wrong with my plant? Well, the first question is, tell me where you live, and let me try to guess what's going on. But that is a fascinating map that the University of Texas put out. And here is a more specific look at it in our area. Again, these are the newest soils, and this is the oldest soils. Oh, here's that key for you. So some of these will go back 245 million years ago. That's going to be some of the green ones up here. So if you are interested in doing this, what you would do is you would type in Mesozoic period Texas. And it'll give you more information than you want to. If you can't sleep, that'll put you to sleep. You can specifically ask about the Trinity group, K1. Find K1 on here. Find about where you live on here and go over here and ask about the Kalahua Formation. What does it tell you about the formation of the soils in this part of the state at this time in Texas history? All right, another map. The first time you got the map, now you have to pay attention to the map. Here's what I was telling you about the, what is this? This is more or less where they thought that asteroid hit. And the waters flooded all the way up to right there, Balcones Escarpment. And the point of that is that shows you the power of the Balcones Escarpment when it was formed. This whole area, everything here, was completely flooded. That's a fascinating YouTube video to watch. All right, away from the maps, back to us. What does it all mean? Some plants will not grow here. That's the answer to to most people, to your questions. Yes?
What was the fascinating YouTube that we should watch?
It's if you can type in the dinosaur killer asteroid, and they have annotated what that looked like and how fast that spread out. Absolutely amazing. If you watch channel 29 last night, or I don't know, whenever it was, There's a 2% chance in a few years that they're going to hit by another asteroid.
There's one they're tracking now.
And that's the one. It was a 1% chance. Now it's 2%. So you better start making eyes to the Creator if you believe in Him. All right. So anyway, some plants will not grow here. That's just, the nurseries will sell you whatever it is you want to buy, because that's what they do. They sell those beautiful Japanese maple plants. They are gorgeous. And they don't work. There's a guy in Dallas, it's a place called Metro Maples, and I went to the propagation training in Fort Worth. If y'all, when you become certified, you get to go to advanced trainings. Tarrant County puts on a fantastic propagation 2-day seminar. And one of the presenters was a guy from Metro Maples. And so I took a little, I don't know what y'all's vacation like. My vacations, I'm gonna go to the nurseries in Dallas, see what they got. And I went there and I said, I'd like to buy 2 of these plants. He said, I'm not gonna sell them to you. I thought, he said, they're not gonna grow down there. He said, I can get you down to Waco. I have maybe one in Austin, but he said, in South Texas, it's too hot. You're not going to get the color that we get in Dallas. And he's a really pretty decent guy. He hand grafts every plant. It is a fascinating thing to watch. Wow. He has the stock. He has the plants he's going to graft. He very carefully cuts it, puts it in there, wraps it, waxes it, and then it's absolutely incredible. But anyway, my point is some plants just don't grow here. But they'll sell you whatever you want to buy. We need compost to improve the structure, the mineral efficiency. Compost will let iron be absorbed by the plants. Compost will let phosphorus be absorbed by the plant because the soil's grabbing those nutrients. The compost changes that. You can't make clay into sand, but you can break clay up so that it's more absorbent. It also affects the ability to water to drain through it, and it can modify a soil pH temporarily. It's not going to go to 8 to 5. It may go from 8 to 7.99, but it's only going to be as long as that compost is active. It's going to be depleted, and you need to add compost to it again. All right. So what can you do? Well, you can test your soil if you'd like to. Send it off to A&M. You'll learn about the pH. You'll learn about your texture. Be aware of the nutrient deficiencies, which I had in that one slide, and then add compost. And I have a slide on compost. I don't want to get ahead of myself. How do you get soil samples? If this is the year, you dig a hole, 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 put them all in a 5-gallon container, you fluff it up, and you take just enough and send it into a paper bag to A&M, and they will analyze it for you, and they'll tell what nutrient deficiencies you have, and then you bring it home to somebody and ask them to read you the results, and have you explain the tools you need are very simple. You need a plastic bucket. This is a tool that you can get samples with, or you can just use whatever it takes, just get samples. Not one area. You need to get a sample from all areas because all the soil influences each other.
Where do you buy those sample tools?
These you can buy. Honestly, I guess online's the answer to everything. I don't know. There may be somebody locally that has one of these things. That's just a spade. That's a hori knife, drill, or shovel, whatever it is. I'm developing an arboretum over northwest San Antonio, and I'm going to have the soil sampled. Actually, it's going to be an experiment I'm trying to try it out in a couple of years. I'm taking the soil from here, and I'm having it tested. Well, actually, it's all the same soil. 3 parts, 1, 2, 3. This is what I do as a master gardener because I don't have a life. So I'm going to have this soil tested. This soil is going to be the same soil, but it's going to have compost added to it. And then this soil is going to have compost, and it's going to be organically amended with like fish emulsion, kelp, whatever else. And then I'm going to compare these soils over a period of years. So what do the nutrients look like in this one? How does it look like with just compost added? And then what does it look like with these various organic soil amendments? Because then I will be able to tell, based on my really rough, it's master's degree, it's not doctorate degree, but it's master's degree worthy, that yes, compost will have this type of effect on soil, and the organic soil amendments will have, this is what the numbers say, yes.
So then in that case, that's 3 separate soil tests, right?
It'll be the initial, because this is all the same soil, there'll be the initial soil test. Then I'm going to have this one tested again, just to have it tested again. Yes, and I'll have this one, so it'll actually be a total of 4. And I'll do it over a period of years because I want to see how long it takes for the soils to have a significant difference. Organic materials you need to add more often because they get used up. Synthetic material is made to last longer. If you use synthetic fertilizer for your yard, that's going to take the better part of slow release. It's going to take most of the growing season to deteriorate. Organic material, you're going to use 3 or 4 times through the year because it's going to deteriorate more rapidly. And a side note, you didn't ask, but I'll tell you anyway, because I have 30 seconds. Organic fertilizer you put down earlier, a month earlier than you do synthetic. Because synthetic, when you put it in the ground of water, it starts to dissolve. Organic material has to be eaten by the critters. Remember our scientific poop loop? They have to eat it, and they have to excrete it, and what is excreted is what the grass grows. By itself, the poultry-based fertilizer doesn't do anything. The microbes have to eat it, they have to excrete it, and that's what the plant wants. So you put it in about a month, you use the organic, and then synthetic, use in April. Anyway, has nothing to do with this. So let's talk real quick about compost. More than you want to know, the bumper sticker says compost happens. It does not happen. It's a cute little phrase. It fits on your truck, but it really does not happen. This is mine. Compost is something that we manufacture. We're trying to imitate nature. Right now, humus is being formed all over the place. The leaves hit the ground, the critters eat the sticks and the wood, the whatever, and they excrete it, and it's forming humus with the top layer of soil. Compost is where we try to imitate nature. We try to make it. And to make it, we need air, we need water. I think I have it all here. For us, we need air, we need water, we need browns, greens, and we need heat. The heat is needed because the heat is what's going to break down the browns. This is what you want it to look like. And this is what it does not look like if you buy from the bulk yards, because they're in a hurry to turn this stuff out. They need to get it out, so you'll find a lot of sticks in there. They will say, well, that's for aeration for the soil. Well, the problem is the microbes which need to break down those sticks are not going to feed your plant the nitrogen. They're breaking down the sticks. So that's kind of an odd thing to say. But they're in a hurry. They need to get their product turned around. Ideally, it looks something like this. You cannot see the tomatoes and the banana peels and the sticks and everything like that. There are... This is the perfect world. You throw all your garbage in the first one here, and then as that starts to break down, you turn it, put it in here, you turn it and put it in here, and by the time it gets over here, it should be done. We had some Barry County Master Gardeners say they can make it in a couple months. Physically, it's not possible. It takes many months before this breaks down to something that's really very useful. I found out my compost is ready when it has worms in it. You cannot put worms in a compost pile because this thing's going to get up to 160 degrees, and worms don't like it at 160 degrees. But when it's in the final staging products over here, it's 55 degrees. That pile will be 55 degrees. If you go to pull up, you're going to find earthworms all over the place because they love it. And those earthworms are making that soil incredibly rich. So, browns and greens, if y'all had compost presentation yet?
No.
All right, well, then if it's coming up, ignore this. If it's not coming up, pay attention. It needs air because the microbes need air in there so they can breathe. I only have 2 bins because I don't have room for 3. What I do was I grab all the leaves and I mow them up because the oak leaves have a thick coating to them and they don't break down very easily. I mow them up, put them in a separate pile, And then I get, those are called browns, and then I get some greens. I'll explain that to you. In a perfect world, you have all your browns and you have all your greens. You mix them together and poof, you have compost. In the real world, you make your compost pile and you say, I got a banana peel, I'll just throw that in there. Well, you technically interrupted the cycle. So somehow it all works out. But it needs air so the critters inside can breathe, and it also helps with the heat. It needs water, and this is the biggest mistake people make in composting. They will get their pile of leaves and they'll water it. Now, what did we look at on the slide about gravitational pull of water? The water by nature is going to go on the outside. You're going to put 50 gallons of water on this and dig down 5 inches and it's dry as can be. Because the water by nature is going to the outside. I saw a video that this one person doing it, and it's what I do. I have 2 green cans and I fill them most of the way up with leaves, and then I turn the hose on, I soak them in those green cans for a couple days. Then I empty the green cans into my bin because they are saturated with water. Now when I add water, water will actually get to be where they need to be, go where it needs to be. Browns, what are browns? Browns are leaves, paper, not copy paper. I did that once. I was going to, being a master gardener, I was going to save the planet from deforestation. And I told everybody in the office, I'll take your shredded paper because I'm a master gardener. And so they gave me all the paper, and I put it in my little pile out here, and I watered it down. The next day I had this most beautiful, what's that paper called? I had the most beautiful paper mache you've ever seen in your life. Because copy paper has some sort of thing on the top, and it just glued together, so it all ended up in the garbage can. Newspaper, leaves, sticks, those are called browns. And then greens are things like banana, any kind of fruits and vegetables, no meat products, anything like that, because that will attract all the critters. So here's my greens. One of the best places to get them is Starbucks. You just walk in and say, I want your coffee grounds. If you look old like me, then one of you very nice young people will carry it to my truck for me. I said, I don't think I can carry that. Then I get home and I tell my wife, I don't think I can carry that. And so there you can see the banana peels, coffee. If you don't go Starbucks, there's their little coffee things. I don't know what that green stuff is. True story. So I tell my son-in-law who works for H-E-B, I need some vegetables. When you go to H-E-B, you buy your little things already cubed. They have to do something with that refuse. So I said, I just need some stuff in my compost pile. He brings me 7 containers and I thought, I need 1. 7. What am I? So I just threw it all in there. I had pineapple trees growing in there, the sweetest smelling stuff you ever imagined. It was just incredible. It was very high in nitrogen, but it worked. It turned out some great stuff. Basically, there's a lot of this just. I'll tell you the simple answer. Here's the fancy stuff if you're ever on Jeopardy. There's a ratio between leaves, let's make it simple, between leaves and coffee grounds, there's a ratio that we need. And the ratio varies. It depends on the products. This is just because it's a compost presentation. They'll say 30 to 1. How you want to measure 30 to 1, I'm going to challenge you to do that in just a minute. Basically, it means 7 piles of leaves and 3 piles of coffee grounds. That's 70-30. It can, if you read Purdue University, they'll say you can do 50-50. Just put in half leaves, half coffee grounds, if you'd like. That's something you'd experiment with. Basically, here's the thing. If your pile stinks, it has too much nitrogen. The bacteria are excreting a gas, and that's what you're smelling. If you come back 3 years later and your pile's still sitting there, you have too much carbon. So it's just getting that balance between carbon and nitrogen. And so here is, here's why this is from Cornell. If you want to get your 30 to 1 ratio. All right, let's figure this out. Cornell is the land-grant university for New York. You need to get the quantity of material 1 of carbon, that 100 minus the moisture content in parentheses plus all this stuff here, divided by all this stuff here, And that will determine if you have a 30-to-1 ratio. Now, why do they come up with this complicated thing? Well, first off, because they're in the Northeast, and people like that are in the Northeast. They make things as complicated as possible. But here's why. Here's for you math people. Remember I told you math people try to help me figure out rain averages? Wood chips have 400 parts of carbon to 1 part nitrogen. How much manure do I need to get 400 to 1 down to 30 to 1? How many piles of cow whatever am I going to add to my wood chips to make 400 to 1, 30 to 1? That's why I said it really varies. Shredded leaves are 60 to 1. That's pretty close. Coffee grounds are 20 to 1, so we can work out coffee grounds, but all this stuff this is all carbons. So you got a bunch of shredded cardboard, it's 325 to 1. You're trying to figure out, I need to have a 30 to 1. And Cornell had that really great formula, and if I can just plug in the numbers, I'll know how many grass clippings I need to get this down. So that's why I said the real simple rule of thumb, if it smells, there's too much nitrogen, add some leaves. If it's not breaking down, it's too much wood, brown, and you need to add some green to it. All right, so we already covered Cornell, so that takes care of that. I already told you that. Here's the way the process works. You put all your stuff together. This is the initiation phase. Within a couple days, it's going to go up to, we're over here, not over there. It's going to go up to maybe 150, 160 degrees. And if you buy it, because I bought some yesterday, this one place, and the steam was coming off in the back of my pickup truck. One day I bought some, well, it's funny now. It was not funny at the time. But I had a pickup truck full of manure compost, and my grandson, the oldest one, he just said, great, look at these, jumped in the truck. He starts screaming, his hands are turning red because it's about 140 degrees. And but it only took that one time. And the other three said, that's why he's the oldest. But what happens is, in this initial stage, a little thing called psychrophilic, not psycho. That's people who study this too much. Psychro is cold-loving bacteria. They're going to start eating, and as they eat, let's say go psychro, as they eat, the pile's going to warm up. The meso means middle. They're going to start eating the material. They're going to start eating the psychos. And then what's going to happen, it's going to go up even more. And then the thermophilic, thermo means hot. They're going to start eating any psychos left. They're going to eat this meso. They're going to eat whatever's there. All of this is a war going on in there. And they're all eating and they're all excreting. They're turning all this stuff into that very fine humus. Then when you get over here, that's where the beetles start coming in. The large grubs start coming in. They start chewing this down. They break it up even more. And then finally there's a maturation phase, which this takes months. Some people try to make it quicker, but to get that really fantastic stuff, it takes a while. This is the maturation phase. See what the temperature is? The temperature is just about outdoor temperature. So I've had people ask, can I add worms, earthworms? And no, because it's going to kill them. Over here, the earthworms come naturally. But that's the phase, and the reason the compost piles tend to be 3 by 3, not too small, because you need this heat. And if it's too high, they can be as high as 5 feet. But if I'm 6 foot, I can't turn that stuff over. Compost, what you do is when it gets a certain temperature, you will turn it. How do I know when to turn it? I have a thermometer because I'm too lazy to follow this chart. It's a thermometer, it's about that long, and I'll put it into the compost pile. And it says it's given to 160, I leave it alone. When it goes down, 140, 130, it's time to turn it. Get some fresh air in there, get some fresh life to it, and it'll go back up. And then it'll go back down. Then after a while, it's just not going to go up anymore, and you're over here in the maturation phase. So here is me monitoring my compost pile. That's what the thermometer looks like. Red would indicate it's a little on the warm side. And that says it's about 154 degrees. And that's what and then the color coded makes it easier because then I don't have to read numbers.
Where do you get those?
That I had to get online because I could not find one. They're about that long. And if you have kids, that needs to be put away because they're going to want to play something with it. Once the compost finished, when it's about 1/3 the size, so you get a big old 3 by 3 foot thing, and all of a sudden you have about this much left, and that's when you know it's more or less finished.
And it's got worms.
Mine will have worms in, that's what it looks like. Real quickly, there are two types of the two sources of compost. One is plant-based and one is manure-based. That may or may not be in there, I don't know. Plant-based is, they go to the restaurants, they collect all the food, they put in a pile, it breaks down, they may add sticks and leaves to it. Manure-based, they go to the cattle barns, they go to the chicken houses, and they mix them with sticks and leaves, and it breaks down. So you have plant-based, you have manure-based. Is one better than the other? It depends depends on you. Chicken and rabbit tend to be higher in nitrogen, which means that if you put a tomato plant in a container of chicken manure, it'll burn it. It'll just die because the chicken manure is too hot. In manures, you have two. You have animal-based, you have human-based. And this is where the good stuff is for you people about to eat lunch. Human-based is stuff that we flush. We have to do something with it. Years ago, we let it go out in the creek, and the people in Victoria complained about it, but we didn't care. It was horses. By the time they got up to us, well, we left. But nowadays, we treat it, and it is high in nitrogen. It's very high nitrogen. We mix it with the sticks and leaves and stuff like that. It's a very good product. There is concern with the human base. They label it biosolids. There is concern about the antibiotics that we use and some of the things that we use getting into that. As master gardeners, our responsibility is to give science-based information. Scientifically, there is no evidence that the stuff coming out of us is harmful to anything. Anecdotally, people say, well, you took antibiotics, that's there. The science does not prove that. The science might prove it. Some PhD student at Penn State might be saying, I'm going to prove it does. But if that proof is not there, our responsibility is to acknowledge people's concerns, but to say scientifically, there's nothing wrong with biosolids. Can you use it for your vegetables? Yes, you can. Do we? No, because it sounds gross. It sounds okay to grow your vegetables in horse poop, but our poop just sounds gross, and I'm not quite sure where the difference comes in. If you're around my age, which is almost 30, your great-great-grandparents, they had what they called night soils. And they would go out at night and they would put their stuff into a pile to be composted. There are parts of Africa, my son 1 year bought my wife and me a toilet in Africa. It's a 2-seater because he had a little extra money. And so they use this side until it's filled up. And then they let that sit and they use the other side, and then they take the manure out and they put it in their yard, in their soils, because it'll affect the structure. They can grow plants. So it's possible. We think it's yucky, so don't worry about it. So anyway, there's two sources of manure compost. Biosolids comes from us. Everything else is going to come from the cattle grounds. So what difference does it make? And I'll get this up real quick. Some pictures from my yard. Oh, goody. You can see sort of, maybe not. The lights are here. This is a faded green. This is all the same carpet grass. St. Augustine carpet grass. St. Augustine because it was developed in St. Augustine in Raleigh, North Carolina. That's why it's called Raleigh St. Augustine. Think about Raleigh, San Antonio. That's why we have various diseases down here and bacteria problems with St. Augustine, because it is developed in eastern United States, and we live in southwestern United States. Anyway, this lighter green, no compost. The darker green is the composted areas. I experiment on my yard just to make pictures. My yard doesn't like it, but lighter green, darker green. That's the difference compost will make in a yard. How much compost I have? I'll just shovel it out there. It doesn't have to be an inch. That's too much. Just shovel it out there, and it'll seep into the soil. I told you about the rain we had. This is my front yard, which is basically this is virtually 90% compost. This is 4 inches down of moisture off that one rainfall. So it totally absorbed it, and that soil is only about 4 or 5 inches deep, and the grass works there because it's so heavily composted. We just went through that. What's the best compost? The best compost is the one that you make because you know what's in it. You control the ingredients. The most expensive is the bag stuff. This stuff is like $12 a bag. I can get a truckload for $15. So, but this you can take it, put exactly what you want to. You can store it for a while. You don't have a pickup truck. If you don't have a truck, then you go here. This one just cost you $40,000, or whatever it costs to run a truck. So the best is what you make. The bag is convenient. It's more expensive. Bulk is cheaper. But like I said, you have to buy or rent a truck. We did the types of compost. There is vermicomposting, which is worms, which is a fun thing to do. My grandson's starting right now. I haven't told him the bad news about it. The problem is with vermicomposting, it's this wet pile of yuck. It's sticky, and it's just, the way you have to do it, you have to put a light on it, because the worms don't like light, and they'll huddle to the middle. So then you cut off the edges where the compost is, then they huddle to the middle, and you take off the edges, and you huddle to, and that takes you forever. It's easier to buy it, but it's expensive. Manure Buddies talked about that. Vermi, we just did that. There are mushroom, cotton burr, all this stuff. Does it make any difference? Buy it and find out. Actually, the stuff like the cotton burr will break out the material more, the soil more, because it's bigger pieces. But basically it does the same thing. It's going to break up, it's going to change the structure of the soil. And if you ever go to use it, you might want to smell it first. If it has this really disgusting smell to it, then you'll have to apologize to people for opening their bag of compost in their business. But you'll find something and keep going to get when the smell's right, I guess. Maybe they'll put that on sale, I don't know. And then just one real quick thing about mulches. Mulches, if you're going to go through all the trouble of amending your soil with a perfect compost, you want to protect it if it's in a garden. And that's where mulch comes in. What does the mulch make? This is my yard. This was in July, 6 p.m. in the evening. It was non-mulched soil, and the temperature was 90 degrees. Now the tomato plant's trying to grow. Roses are trying to grow when the soil temperature is 90 degrees. I went to the backyard, same time of day, the soil temperature is 80 degrees. That's the difference mulch makes. It brought the soil temperature down that much because it's adding a buffer from the sun's heat to the soil. It also helps with the wind doesn't blow the soil away. All right, also, last thing with mulch, is that the right picture? Yes, this is a 45-degree angle. Almost. This just goes straight down. So I put these rocks in. This is 100% mulch. There's not soil in here. And underneath there's rocks. See, there's the rocks back there. I'm just going to put mulch in here. So I went out in the truck, my truck, filled it full of mulch, and I thought, well, let's put some plants in there. And they grew. And this thing right now is absolutely full of all sorts of plants. The thing is, this is after rain we had. I don't know how much water, but what do you see on the sidewalk? Absolutely nothing. No soil, nothing. That mulch absorbed everything, and the water flows down here. Hits right here. 100% all absorbed. And like I said, there's no soil. Those are growing, plants are growing in 100% mulch. All right. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. Different kind of mulches. Double shredded is what we recommend. If you get free stuff, this from the city of San Antonio, well, you're going to get stuff. It's free, but you're going to get stuff like this. We want double shredded because it absorbs better, and we want native because it's plants from here. There are a variety of mulches. There's a real pecan is a beautiful mulch, but it's a pecan shell. And so when water rains, it floats down to your neighbor's yard, and they go, look at my beautiful yard. And so double shredded means it's very absorbent. Native means when it breaks down, it's from here. Pine needles may be pretty, but these trees don't need acid. They need alkaline stuff. So it's double shredded, native. All right, so that leaves about 3 minutes for the final slide to answer all your questions. So, what do you got? Questions? Yes?
If you don't put a mulch
Yes.
yourself, is a specific area of sun that should take to get better?
With mulch? Mulch simply protects the soil.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Compost. I compost everything in my yard. It goes all over the place. And compost is really, you're gonna find sticks, that doesn't matter, it's part of it. It really is, it's a powder, and that powder gets into the soil, and that changes it after the first application. Now, there's a number of ways to do it. Basically, just what I do is I make pile here, then I'll spread it out and I'll water it. Then I'll do this area. Because my sister-in-law had some guys do it, and they put it all over the yard. It took them a couple hours to do it. When they wanted to spread it, it had burned. Because it's so high in nitrogen, it burned the grass. And it looked like a twister board. It came back, but I thought it was humorous. She did not laugh. So I'll spread it out, and I'll water it in. And then I'll do the next section, and I'll water. It takes me a little longer, but I know how much compost is going on there, and I can control it. And you can also plant directly in compost, but that's a different presentation. Yes, you're going to raise your hand?
Yeah.
All right.
What is the sandy loam stuff these people that service your lawn want to put on your lawn?
Sandy, okay, that tells you first off it's going to be primarily sand. And loam means it has a mixture of clay, silt. They may put in some red sand from the Poteet area. They'll put some soil amendments in there. The wrong thing to do is add sand to our clay soil because that just makes concrete.
Right.
But that's why the sandy loam is a different texture and it'll work differently. If you add sandy, if I did my experiment, and that'd be a fun one to do, I'll think about that one. Nobody else do it. But you could do sand, a sandy loam, and compost. And at the end, see what they look like. My guess, the compost is going to look the same. And compost you can get for $15 a yard, if you live where I do, otherwise. Other questions? Yes?
Is the compost starter even necessary, or am I just wasting my money?
Have you already bought it?
Yeah.
It's a great product. If you have, I never use it. Basically, it's just microbes.
Right.
You want to stay compost art, go dig a hole in the ground, throw some soil in there because that soil has microbes. Yes?
I think I missed the key point in one of your slides where you were talking about watering a compost pile, and you
Yes.
said don't just spray water all over the top.
Right.
What's the best way to water your compost pile?
When it's initially made, gravity is going to pull the water the fastest way it can. So it's going to go around the side. It's hard to go through all those leaves. So if you put water on if you make a pile of leaves and water it, the outside is going to be soaked. But if you dig down, it's going to be completely dry. So that's why what I do is I have 2 of those big green cans. I put my leaves in there, and I will soak them for a couple days until they are sopping wet with water. And then I put them, because now when I water, the physics of water will drain it into the pile as opposed to the outside.
And then Bill, I believe this other lady here in the front.
Yes.
has a question.
Yeah, actually 2 questions, if that's okay.
Oh, man.
So for one, is there any concern with, say, putting in small amounts of copy paper, cardboard boxes, et cetera, with like chemicals leaching into your compost, or do you not worry about that?
There has not, the copy paper, as I said earlier, is going to turn to paper mache because there's a coating on it, and I don't know that it'll even break down. It'll take a long time to break down. With cardboard, I don't know, I have never read anything that it is an issue. The concern would be the tape,
Yeah, I mean, we'll take.
but you're assuming people taking off the tape. It's going to be, just a bucks in it. But you have to tear into small pieces because the microbes' mouths are not really big. Okay, that was one question. Second question?
Yeah, so the second question is, so let's say you're like the laziest composter ever.
Yes.
You take your, this is me, you just kind of take your stuff and you throw it in your bin, maybe you have 3 bins.
Yeah.
Is there any downside, or does it harm your compost in any way to say, you know what, if it takes a year and a half, I don't care. I'll
No
go back?
problem whatsoever.
Okay.
You just, if you want to hurry, you can do it one way. If you're not in a hurry, it's all right. It'll break down. Nobody's keeping up with the stuff out here.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
I saw something that I thought was interesting, but I really wonder if it works. It was composting, right? So instead of using the traditional compost bin,
Yes.
right, because it takes longer, they were digging a hole and then wrapping the hole with cardboard and then putting in the scraps and all those things in it and then covering it with leaves
Right.
for a faster breakdown.
Yeah, I don't know if it's faster, but yeah, it's kind of the same thing. The ground acts like as a heat. It's the inverse. Here we have a pile keeping the heat in. The heat's being kept in by the soil. If you put bones in, the animals are going to dig it up, so that's be non-bones. There is a thing, I can't remember the type of composting it is, but you put things in an airtight container and it breaks it down differently. Put some bokashi stuff in there and breaks it up a little bit. So it'll work, yeah. Did you almost kind of like,
Did,
I'm gonna wait till you have a mouthful of food and then I'll call
my
you.
question is, because I've done one compost was kind of successful only by accident.
Yeah?
Because it was so hot, and I went
Right.
out there and churned it, and it really became very rich. But is there a time to stop throwing stuff in there?
Yeah, not really. I mean, in the theoretical world, make your compost bin and leave it alone. In the real world, we had a watermelon, I'm gonna put it in the middle of it. And I've done that. What I'll do is if it's 3 feet high, I'll dig 2 feet down, I'll put a watermelon grinds in and I'll cover it up. And it breaks down quickly because it's sugar. And those microbes love it. If you go out 3 days later, that watermelon's gone. There's no sign of it ever existing.
Right, yeah, because I'm in a very small yard.
Yeah.
So, to have a couple of bins for compost just doesn't seem practical. But on the backside, I have cows, so I get some rodents,
Yeah.
but I figured that might keep them out there instead of coming in.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's just for the lawn and
Sure.
plants.
Yeah.
Can you throw eggshells in your greens?
Yeah, you can. You might want to wash them out first.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can. You might, well, what they'll do say is wash them out, dry them, and then kind of crinkle them up because those microbes, that eggshell is kind of big. They're going to go, oh, mama. It's like getting that 4-foot Big Lou's pizza. I can't eat that in 2 minutes. There was a question in the back someplace.
Oh, I was just going to mention, you were asking about the watering. What we do is whenever we're building ours, it's a layer of about like this, and then we have the hose set up to where it sprinkles
Yes.
on it the entire time we're building it, and then we just do it by layer by layer.
That's correct.
Always put
Yeah.
water on it the whole entire time. So it's
The entire time. Yes, that's a great way to do it. In fact, I saw a YouTube video lady doing that. That made me think about soaking mine.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that's the same thing. You're getting water in all the levels.
You can
All right.
soak your cardboard too if you're using it.
You can soak your cardboard. Yeah.
Makes it a lot easier to tear up.
Yeah. All right. I can make up answers to anything else you have. Because other than that, it's time for your next speaker. In fact, it's overtime. All right. Thank y'all for being so patient and sitting through all my stuff.
On how to pronounce and spell my last name. But you guys seem like a nice group, so we won't do that. K works fine. We're going to talk about everybody's most favorite topic when it comes to gardening, weeds. And no, I am not talking about weed. I mean, you know, sorry about that. We can if you want, but no, that's not really what I'm going to talk about. Is we're going to talk about actual real weed and what it is and how to recognize it. Now, I always thought that a weed was any plant that was where you didn't want it. That seems like a reasonable definition to me, but there are actually some more technical aspects to this. Excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. The cedar and I are having a really good time. We're going to talk about ecological and biological aspects of weeds and how they affect them and how to deal with them. Basically, a weed are plants that negatively impact human activity. So if you're trying to grow vegetables or flowers and there are weeds, that's a negative impact. I got to remember that this one has to be pointed in that direction. Okay, So we're going to talk about biological and ecological, I apologize, impacts. So some defining characteristics. Now, if you have questions as we go along, just ask me. If I don't know the answer, I will make something up. I'm good. All right, so here we go. Interference with desirable plants. And what flower is blossoming right now? Dandelions. You know, that's not the one you want, is it?
But that's all the bees have on it.
True. So it's anything that gets in the way of what you want to grow. So that's one definition. They are persistent. I spent 4 hours weeding at the Christian Covered Garden this last weekend because, you know, all this nice, warm, unseasonable weather that we've been having. Nothing else is growing, but guess what? Grew. Weeds. And I let them get a little ahead of me. They are able to occupy areas that we can't get good thing, like a serious slope, for example. Sometimes you can't get something you want to grow there, but what will grow there? A weed. So sometimes you take what you can get. If weeds all I can get, then that's what I'll take. And they can, some of them are injurious, that is, they can cause actual physical harm to human beings. Think poisonous sumac, for example. Or destructive. I can do this.
How do you get rid of that nut sedge? Sort of napalm.
What are you doing, Paul? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay, interference. The impact of one plant on another, okay? And plants do have, just like other people impact us, plants impact each. What's he doing? Plants impact each other. Now, what do plants need other than soil, obviously, to grow?
Love.
They need light. They need water. They need nutrients, right? So because weeds are frequently the first things out of the ground, who's going to get the light, the water, and the nutrients? Yep. And they frequently grow very fast, much faster than the plants that you want to grow. They will be there. I think the term that gets used someplace is persistent and pernicious. I like that, alliterative. Okay. Part of it has to do, and we'll talk about root systems here in a minute and what to do about them, because there are all sorts of different kinds. But it has to do with their growth habit in terms of roots, how they spread, the height of the plant. Some weeds get very tall, they provide shade, they keep other things from growing, as well as taking up the nutrients. The leaf area, the amount of branching. And so some of them are very low growing. Think purslane. And they cover everything. And getting them out is, no, I won't use that word. I'm not supposed to use that word. Okay. So, I'll make them sit down here in a minute. Okay, so interference, weed density. A lot of the damage that weeds do has to do with the fact that they grow very fast and they grow very dense. There's a lot of them. If you just had a weed, you know, that's easy. Reach down, pull it up, get a hoe, get a shovel, whatever, and it's gone. But that's not how they grow. They grow all over the place. They spread. And therefore, the resources are not available. Anybody here like to raise flowers besides me? I have a very small vegetable garden and a very large rose garden. And so, even though I've had training as advanced training in vegetables, my actual thing that I really like to grow as a master gardener are flowers. And you know what those weeds do to those flowers that I want to grow? Bad things. So they have a huge impact on desirable plants, whether it be trying to grow tomatoes. You know what everybody's favorite vegetable is, right? It's actually a fruit. It's a tomato. When we have our plant sales, we offer a lot, and you'll have an opportunity to volunteer at some of them. Some of you may already be growing for the plant sales. We offer a lot of different kinds of vegetables. You know what the biggest seller is? Tomatoes. And if you have a lot of weeds in a tomato bed, the tomatoes don't grow well. That's also true of eggplant or any other kind of vegetable that you might have. Those just happen to be two of my favorites. Okay, so interference. Besides just the growth pattern, some plants actually put out toxins in the soil to keep other plants from growing. I'm here, you can't be here, I'm going to poison you. And they do it. Okay, persistence. And this has to do with how part of this persistence has to do with, we're going to talk about several aspects. One, seed production, okay? How many seeds per plant do certain kinds of plants produce? Now, in this list, which is by no means complete, okay, this just happens to be some of the more common weeds, we range all the way from 2,400 seeds per plant, which seems like a pretty big number to me, to 1.8 million for purslane. And we're talking about purslane and various things here as we go along because purslane keeps coming up. Now, you all know what I'm talking about when I say purslane, right? Mm-hmm. It's a little succulent ground cover. It's actually quite attractive, has pretty little flowers on it, and it's edible. People eat it. It's quite tasty, except it will grow where you don't want it to grow and take up the nutrients of the things you do want to grow. So this is a lot of seeds per plant. You know, this little plant comes like, Another aspect in terms of seed-related characteristics and persistence is some of their seeds will last under adverse conditions, like bad weather, for example. It gets cold, where the seeds of a desirable plant might die, no longer be viable. Weeds, on the other hand, that's cold, who cares? We'll still grow. Okay, another aspect, how long do the seeds last for the weeds? Now, if you go to a nursery or Home Depot or someplace and you buy seeds, okay? On the packet, there is a expire by date, right? On almost all of them. In other words, get these things in the ground, they're not going to be good after a certain, we call it a germination rate. You know, I have 100 seeds. If I plant them when they're good, I'm probably going to get 95 to 100 plants. If I wait past the expiration date, as time goes on, the germination rate for the seeds goes way down. So instead of 100 plants, I might get 50 plants, and then as time goes on, I'm going to get 30 plants, and then if it lasts long enough, I won't get any. So that's why that data's there. The weeds don't understand the rules. They just don't get it. They will last for a long time. So, years, longevity. This ranges from barnyard grass at 5 to shepherd's purse, 35 years. 35. And there's our favorite purslane, 20 to 25. They need to get with the program here. Okay, persistence. Adaptation for both short and long distance seed settling. This is our favorite flower. After the flower is gone and the seeds have come up, which, as I walked across my backyard the other day, guess what the dandelions in the backyard are doing? This. And a nice breeze comes along, and those seeds go all over, right? And where they settle, they grow. Okay, more persistence. They have different ways of spreading besides seeds. Now, most plants, not all, unless there's human interference to cause different growth, the primary form of spreading their growth are seeds. Now, when we do propagation, we will talk about the ways we cause plants to grow besides seeds. Seeds definitely one of them. But cuttings, for example, division, there are other things that we can do to cause more plants of a certain kind that we want. But in nature, if we just leave the plants alone, the only way most of them are going to reproduce is with seed production. Except those weeds, like I said, they just don't like to follow the rules. The weeds will do things like, oh, well, we've got seeds, and I think I'll have a stolon, maybe a tuber, possibly a bulb, a rhizome. We'll talk about all of those as well, not instead of, but as well as my seeds. So that means that's one of the reasons why certain weeds spread and grow faster, is they have multiple ways of reproducing. Have any of you ever tried to get rid of Bermuda grass? Now, I mean, we consider it a grass, we consider it something that we want, except when it's not where we want it, right? So you have a nice, beautiful Bermuda grass lawn, and you have a flower bed along the edge. Guess where the Bermuda grass wants to grow? In the flower bed, right? And you go chop it out, and here it comes back. We'll talk about why chopping out Bermuda grass may not be the best way to do that. So because they have other ways of propagation, that means they are much more viable when they're in competition for nutrients and water and things like that. They can get there. And it also means that, hey, I dug that plant up. I dug it up. What are you doing over here? That thing that you didn't see under the ground, it grew right there. Okay, persistence, Bermuda grass. I was just talking about Bermuda grass. It is a plant that can make a beautiful lawn, or it is a plant that can cause extremely bad words to come out of your mouth, right? So, another one is Johnson grass. Kind of the same deal. Nutsedge, that's what we got right here, is one of the more common, and it has roots it's going to have a flower, seeds, right? And then you see these little bulblet things, yeah? And they will all grow
How do you kill that stuff out?
with great persistence on your part. We'll talk about control methods here in a little bit. Okay, I mentioned earlier the ability to, excuse me, the ability to occupy sites that other plants won't grow in, like areas under, like a construction site, for example. You're having something built. Nothing's going to grow there, right? It's all dug up, and except overnight, all of a sudden, you got seeds. And there's weeds growing. So they can grow almost any place. Okay, they can be injurious or destructive. The three that come to mind, there are undoubtedly others, but the three that come to mind are poison ivy, poison oak, and poison sumac. Now, obviously, there are non-poison versions of all of those, but you don't want to get into the poison ones. Anybody here ever gotten into any of that? It's miserable, isn't it? I remember years ago, a friend of mine was traveling on business, and on an interstate, there was I don't know whether there was a major accident or if there was an accident in construction going on, whatever, but anyway, they were stuck at dead stop on the interstate, right near an underpass. And she desperately had to go to the bathroom. Oh, yeah. It was it was miserable, miserable. I have never felt so sorry for anybody in my entire life. So it can also be, some of this stuff can be very harmful to livestock, as in deadly. Okay. Are we going to do this? I hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. Are we going to do it? Come on, sweetie. Why are you saying that you're moving and you're not? Where is? Thank you. We may need a new battery in this. All right, so let's talk about the life cycle of a weed. Basically, it's like kind of like a person. The young person, like toddler, you know, just little. Then it becomes a teenager, grows flowers and stuff. Doesn't do anything you tell it to do. Some of you, how many of you have had teenagers? Okay, then you know what I'm talking about. And then, like, if you're lucky, all of us, it gets to old age. And then it dies. This is the same life cycle any plant goes through, except there's a little few differences. Now, are you going to do this? Thank you. Sorry, I talk to equipment. And since I'm not the most mechanical or technical person in the whole world, is Frank still here? Frank is my techie advisor on my personal stuff. He knows. He can tell you stories. I frequently, the words that come out of my mouth when I talk to equipment are, I talk to my plants. Actually, it's basically talk. But I talk to my plants and I try to say nice things to them, but I have been known to threaten them. You know, if you don't do like you're supposed to, you are out of here. They never pay any attention. It's kind of like me telling the weather what to do. I've tried that too.
They're probably at the teenage stage.
Yeah, I know. They're stuck in that cycle though. Okay. Let me go back. I do want to go back. I think I skipped something there. Annual life cycle for either a broadleaf or grass. Annual means what? 1 year. It will grow, produce seeds, and die in 1 year, okay? But all plants are not annual plants. So we'll talk about,
Right.
That is
I'm not saying it out loud.
you're right.
Okay, this we have what's called a biennial life cycle, which you're probably, all, you've had your botany session, so everybody knows what a biennial life cycle is, right? Did you feel like you were back in high school or college when you had the botany class? It's like, okay, I sort of vaguely remember some of this, but it's been a long time. I remember the feeling. But biennial basically means that it takes 2 years for the cycle to complete. So I will grow in 1 year, but I will not flower and produce seeds until the second year, and then I will die. And of course, the seeds are my progeny, and then they grow and they go through the same thing. Here, I give. Okay. Perennial, on the other hand, means I'm here, and you ain't getting rid of me. I am going to be here unless you do something. So, basically it means, it doesn't mean I won't ever die. It just means I have more than 2 years, and it's going to vary a lot depending on the plant. But I am going to grow, flower, produce seeds, go into dormancy, come back next year, and do the same thing all over again. And then my kids will be growing, producing seeds, and going on and on and on. Now, at some point, I will die, either of natural causes, water deprivation, or because some human being, mean person, came along and killed me. Okay. So, what we have here are herbaceous plants, 2 types of perennials, excuse me. Simple. All they do is produce by seed, okay? That's, and that's true whether it's an annual, biennial, or perennial. They're just going to produce by seed, no other methodology. However, then there are those that have reproductive efforts by seed and also by root system, okay? What they call vegetative structure. So their root system helps them. And now tomatoes actually can be grown that way too. Tomatoes can if they hit the ground, they can grow by something other than seed. Okay. So here's a perennial life cycle for a bulb. Now, wild garlic produces flowers, okay? It's going to have seeds. You can grow garlic from seeds. But it also is going to reproduce the bulb, the garlic bulb. And they will multiply. Then another example here is Canadian thistle, which sends out the root system and then it goes down. These, well, here, let me get onto the next screen. They're called rhizomes or stolon. Or in the case of Bermuda grass, This is Johnson grass. Rhizomes are growth under the ground, little tuber things that then grow and put up more plants, right where the root system has gone, okay? And that's how Johnson grass reproduces, as well as by flower if you let it get big enough. Any grass will also flower. Tubers, same deal, basically, just a different physical structure. And this is nutsedge. The roots grow out and they form a tuber. And a new plant will grow from that. It'll be like a sweet potato or a potato, okay? Except you don't want to eat it. And then we have stolon. Rhizomes are under the ground. Stolon are on top of the ground. But it's the same deal. It spreads out, grows a new plant. Now, Bermuda grass actually has both. You wonder why it was so hard to get rid of that Bermuda grass? It does everything it can to survive. They're showing a Bermuda grass stolon here in this illustration, but they actually has both.
Well, we call those runners, right?
Uh-huh.
So we used to call them, now they're called stolons. And if you look, the seeds are up there on the first one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I love Bermuda.
Lottie does.
She's the only one, I wish I could. You know what, I bought jigs to plant in my pasture and it was.
Uh-huh.
I was just starting to like you too.
I'm not scared.
Well, it's a challenge. It really is a challenge sometimes. You know, I guess if you looked at it from a positive perspective, weeds have a very high survival instincts. You know, they are going to be around if at all possible. They're going to do whatever. Where some of the other things that we want to grow, I think your previous speaker said some things aren't supposed to grow here. Uh-huh. And that's true. We keep persisting and trying to grow them sometimes. I remember, this has been a while ago, but I had a neighbor of mine. Now, I live here in Seguin. We have caliche clay as our soil. When I first moved here, not quite 11 years ago, and tried to put a fork in the ground, I said, okay, raised beds. We're doing raised beds. But I had a relatively new neighbor who said, I want to grow azaleas. Now, I've lived where azaleas grew and were beautiful, and they are a beautiful plant when they bloom. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. I said, I don't think so. I said, you might do it in a pot if you get a special soil and you add acid to it on a regular basis, but the soil here is not acidic. It's alkaline. And azaleas and rhododendron, which are akin to each other, need acidic soil. Now you go a little further south, or you go over to East Texas to the piney woods, you can find soil that will beautifully grow azaleas, just not right here. So sometimes you do have to modify your wants.
Go with plan B.
Well, I mean, you know, there are people in this world who go, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it.
I do have a question, Kay. Why does places like Lowe's and Home Depot sell rhododendrons and azaleas and all that stuff, knowing full well they're not gonna grow here?
Because there are suckers born every minute. Now, they may have customers from other close areas, but not right here, who might have soil, even it might be marginal, but at least they might grow, and they probably wouldn't do well, but they might grow. They would probably grow here. Now, they're not going to ever get healthy big plants or anything, but you might be able to get them to grow. They're not going to bloom well. They're not going to be what you want an azalea or a rhododendron to be.
I got you.
Just get you some Texas sage or
Yeah, Texas sage now, Texas sage will do it. The only problem with Texas sage, and I have some and I love it, it has to rain.
Yeah.
I mean, watering doesn't cut it. It has to rain.
Needs it deep.
And so if it will warm back up after today and not get really cold, then in a few weeks, I anticipate that my Texas sage plants are going to be absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, but it's gonna warm up and rain, and you won't have time to enjoy your Texas sage because then you're trying to de-weed the rest of the weeds.
Exactly. You know, there's only so much we can do. So let's talk about control. So, when you're thinking about controlling it, what you do depends on what is growing, okay? All sizes do not, one size doesn't fit everybody, okay? And so you frequently have to use more than one methodology if you have more than one kind of weed growing to be effective. So look, you have to think about the biology of the plant. What's the structure, the biological structure of the plant, and the life cycle of the plant. Figure out what it is you need to do. So, first thing is know what you're dealing with. There are some resources listed here. I also have a couple of apps on my phone that are very handy for any plant identification. iNaturalist is one, and I'm trying to think of the name of the other one.
What do you have, the Naturalist, and which app do you have?
I have iNaturalist and something else.
I have Seek.
There's several.
Yeah, Seek works pretty good.
I'm trying to think of what the other one was. I use iNaturalist more.
Oh, it's by iNaturalist, Seek.
Yeah,
Is that the
yeah.
one you have?
Yep. Anyway, I'll find it.
One thing here, if you have an iPhone and you take a picture of the plant and look at the photo and then just scroll up, this is on an iPhone.
And it'll tell you,
And you can also like link to, it'll say look up plant and it'll take you to the website that'll.
yeah, you can find all sorts of
Yeah, that's
information.
just something you don't have to do, it's just part of your phone.
Scary, at the same time.
I've got too much stuff on my phone.
Let me see if,
I need to delete a bunch of this stuff. However, I do have moon phases, and the new moon is tonight, so.
tonight's a new moon?
I mean, the full moon's tonight, yeah, tonight. Of course, it's so cloudy you won't be able to see it.
And you wonder why,
So I'll find it and let you know. Anyway, first off, identify what you're dealing with. That's rule number one. Then, based on what you find out about it, what's the life cycle? What kind of structure? Is it strictly roots? Does it have rhizomes? Does it have tubers? What are you dealing with? What kind of seasonality? Is it is it a spring? It's here and then it dies down when it gets hot? Or is it a summer? It tells you when best to deal with it. Growth habits, does it spread just by seed, as I mentioned, or vegetative structure as well? And therefore, optimum times, that's the other thing you need to know. Do I want to do pre-emergent? Do I want to do it when it's just a little baby? And do I want to do it anytime? I mean, is it something I can deal with at any time? So let's talk about different kinds of control. Cultural methods. Weed suppression Now, it depends on, some of this they're talking about planting crops and things like it's in your garden, it's not the growing season, but weeds are going to grow. So you grow a cover plant that hopefully suppresses the weeds, okay? So, like buckwheat or something. Now, it depends on how much space you've got, what's feasible. So those are called cover crops. Rotations, they're one of the things that helps is if you don't grow the same thing in the same place all the time. So the things that are attracted to a certain kind of plant, the weeds that like to be companion planting to something, don't get so established. Have any of you ever tried solar? It's not mentioned up here, and I need to add it. Solarization, which can work very effectively. Solarization is in the summertime when you're not growing. You know, there are 3 growing seasons in this part of Texas, I found out when I moved here. Summer is not one of them. Okay? If we have a mild winter, grow things in the winter. Obviously, spring and fall, great growing seasons here generally. But summer is not an effective growing season for most things here. It's a challenge. No matter how much you water, it's a challenge. So if you have weeds, one way to get rid of it in a garden area is you wet the soil very thoroughly. You take some plastic, clear plastic. You want clear because you want sun coming through it. And lay it on top, and then you seal the edges. You can bury them, you can put landscape timbers around, but seal the edges so the air's not going to get in and dry the soil out. And let it bake. Okay? That will, as the weeds try and come up, that will kill them, roots and all. Now here's the downside. It will also kill any earthworms or valuable insects that are in that soil, okay? So you have to do, what kind of trade-off do you want to do here? You obviously don't have anything planted in the soil that you want to grow, but there may be things in the soil that you don't want to kill. But if it is bad enough and the weeds are persistent enough, you may choose to do that. The insects will come back. It will just take some time. So that's a way. Physical barriers to prevent, they talk here about mulches. Organic mulches are probably the best, although you see a lot of rubber, chopped up rubber used sometimes. But organic mulches will decompose over time and add nutrients to the soil if you use bark or hay or something like that. And so that's a valuable thing. If you have an area that you don't want anything to grow in and you're going to put pavers or gravel or something like that, I have it's called dryscape. I have a lot of dryscape in my yard. You can put either landscape cloth down under it. You can do landscape cloth under organic mulches too, or plastic. Now, you definitely do not want to use plastic unless you do not want to grow anything, okay? Because plastic does not breathe, it does not let water through. The landscape cloth will. Landscape cloth will also deteriorate over time. So if you're going, hey, 10 years ago I put landscape cloth and mulch, and now weeds are growing up, how come the landscape cloth didn't work? That's because it rotted, okay? It will deteriorate. So plastic is a real iffy thing. I don't recommend, I have used it in places, but I don't recommend it. I have an area in my, well, actually I have pavers in a lot of my backyard. I have some green, but not much. I'm not a big lawn person. And I don't want to spend, in a drought area, I do not want to spend water watering grass. My garden, yes. My flowers, yes. Grass, not so much. But other people feel differently. That's fine. I admire a beautiful lawn, just not something that's particularly important to me. If you're going to put plastic down and you have, for example, a landscape tree, make darn sure you don't put it around the tree, because you need water to be able to get to the tree roots or shrub or anything like that. Yes?
You're doing the solarization, how long should you leave that plastic on to kill something?
How long?
Yeah, if you want to kill, like, I don't know, say Bermuda grass.
Well, I would leave it, I would leave it for at least 2 or 3 weeks. And it's going to depend on the weather. If you're doing it in the hot summer and you're getting a lot of sun, not a lot of cloud, because you want the sun on it, that's what solarization is doing, then it's shorter time than obviously if it was, but you need, it's hot, it's gotta be hot weather, and you need direct sun. But I would say at least 2 or 3 weeks.
So last summer, I'm, ignorance.
Yeah.
Last summer, I sectioned off part of my yard to do hugelkultur. And I have Bermuda grass everywhere, so I laid black plastic down for like 2 months, trying to kill this stuff out during the heat of the summer. And yeah, it worked kind of good, but guess what I've got coming up now?
Yeah,
So-
well, that's why you want clear.
But now it's too late because I got my beds up there.
Oh, yeah, no, now you don't want to do it now. But if you're going to do it, you want clear plastic, because you want direct sunlight on there.
Now, I've lived in other countries where they do the solarization, but it's for germination, for seed germination. They'll plant the little seeds and then they'll put the plastic.
Well, you can do that, but you're not going to leave it on nearly as long, because if you leave it on long enough, if you're going to do it for the germination, once you start seeing the seedlings come up in the moisture and stuff, you take the plastic off.
Right.
It's like if you've ever grown seedlings in a seed tray and they have the clear plastic cover you put on it, you're creating a moist environment for the seeds to germinate. Well, once the cotyledons are up, remember your botany, cotyledons are the first leaves that come up, but they're not true leaves. You've got the cotyledons up and you see your first true leaves. You take that plastic cover off, because you don't want all that heat and moisture in there. The plants need to start growing in a more natural environment. Okay, any other questions? Good discussion. Any other questions on this? Yes?
Not so much a question, but you were mentioning.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to forgive me, my
Not so much a
hearing.
question, but when you do the solarization and it kills everything underneath,
Uh-huh.
including like the microbes and everything like that, because you're essentially composting it. I take like a layer of compost and put it over to like re-inoculate
Uh-huh.
the bed with the beneficial microbes.
Uh-huh.
You're not gonna get the bugs back for a little while, but.
Let me think about it. I'm not sure. Yeah, I would think so, yes.
Once you kill off everything in there,
Yeah.
you're putting in compost, you're gonna put those beneficial
Yeah.
bacteria back
Yeah.
in, right? In theory.
Yeah, yeah. I would think so.
After you
Now,
put it off and you're ready to plant it.
I do want to say one thing here, because when I equivocated with my answer to you, it reminded me, master gardener is a very misleading term, okay? This is sort of like practicing medicine. It's always a learning curve. Somebody will tell you, oh, you can't do that, it'll never work. Sure enough, works like a charm. Or it'll always do this, it always works. Nope, that didn't work for me. So there are generalizations, but it's always let me try that and see what happens.
Out an experiment.
All right, let's talk chemicals for a minute, okay? So I haven't gotten to chemicals yet. I forgot mechanical. Now, mechanical is, okay, pull the darn weeds up, you know? In some cases, take your hoe. Sometimes you just take your hand, you pull the weeds up. Hand weeding. Now, I usually get comments, oh, remember the timely, that's when they're little, okay? That ideally, when they first come up, before the roots get really established. Flame throwing. Now, I have never personally tried this. Anybody here ever done the flamethrower?
I've thought about it.
Cactus.
Okay. Well, when I went to Texas A&M to take my vegetable specialist training, well, we used to call it specialist, advanced training, we had one of the instructors, smart guy, engineer, named, I've never forgotten, Paul Ayers. He didn't even like vegetables. We had an absolutely gorgeous vegetable garden. It was a challenge to him. He retired and he needed something, and it was a challenge. He was going to have the best vegetable garden. He donated hundreds of pounds every year to the local food pantry. But his favorite form of weeding was a little hand flamethrower. I've never had the guts to try it. I can just see my whole house going up. It's like, so obviously, if you're going to do it, there are certain conditions. One is don't let it be bone dry. And be really careful. But it does work. Now, this last point is important. Remember the weeds with creeping root systems. Do you know one of the best ways to encourage Bermuda grass to grow? Take a hoe and hoe it. Just chop that sucker up. Yeah, and then those stolon and rhizomes that are separated from mama, they'll go, I guess I better grow on my own, hadn't I? And they will. So just know what you're dealing with. There are some things hoeing is going to work fine. Other things you do not want to do that. All right. Now, chemical, herbicides. There are lots of herbicides out there. This is one of the reasons why you need to know what your weed is, because some will work better than others. I'm going to try this remote. Again, we'll see. All right. Some are plant derivative. Some are artificial chemical structures. These are the different kinds. One is a growth regulator. It doesn't actually kill it, it just keeps it from growing anymore. I never have understood why you would want to, as mine is just die, you sucker. Amino acid inhibitors. Amino acids are acids that plants need to grow. So if you put something on it that keeps the plant from producing amino acid, it will eventually die, okay? Meristem destroyers is just they destroy the stem of the plant. Cell membrane destroyers, they just destroy the plant. Root and shoot inhibitors, which is attack the roots. And then amino acid derivatives, which basically do the same thing as the... Okay.
Okay, I think the hard part is reading the label and understanding.
You mean which chemistry PhD do you need?
Yeah, it's very confusing. So if I understand what I'm trying to do and I understand the weed,
No, I understand your...
what do I select to kill the son of a bitch?
Well,
So,
here's the
you know,
thing.
Yeah.
We have wonderful tools at our disposal these days, much more than we have had in the past. I tell people sometimes Google is your friend. Look for some resources. Now, you need to consider the source of the resource. so that it is a viable one. But if you go to a university agricultural website and it says when you're trying to do this, these are the best things to use, you can generally trust that there's research behind that. So rather than try and know all of that yourself, do some research before you go spend your money. It's really helpful. We're very fortunate these days that we do have those resources. As I said, that's said with the word of caveat of caution here. Be careful. There's all sorts of information out there that may or may not be true. So look at your source before you use it. But I agree with you. Reading those labels is,
Now what they've done is they usually have a part of the QR code, and you can take the QR code, and that way you can read it too, you know.
Well,
you
yeah,
can
the
see
font
what it
size
says.
is like
Yeah.
6
Yeah.
to 4, it's impossible to even see.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That's a good idea.
but you do need to try and understand what that particular product is going to do and the hazards involved
Yeah.
as well. Some other things that you have to keep in mind if you're going to use herbicide of any sort, be it plant derivative or whatever, is that how close are you going to be spraying or applying to plants that you want to grow? Because most of those chemicals, they're not going to make a differentiation between the weed and my rose. You know? Dead is dead. The soil texture, particularly if you're doing granular, how easy, if I'm putting a granular down in my yard in the summertime when I have brick instead of soil, that's probably not going to do a very good job unless I break that soil up before I put it down. And I do have brick instead of soil if I'm not. The depth of which the roots are going, if you're applying something like that. Distance to water. Now, why do we care about distance to water?
Because it'll get in the water.
We don't want any herbicide washing down into a creek or a pond or a lake and contaminating the water. Now, if you live, as I do, in a, well, I don't know if you could call Seguin urban, but in a neighborhood environment where there is no close water, not a big issue. On the other hand, if you live on one of the lakes, be careful. And this general environmental conditions. You know, if you're going to spray Roundup or some variety of spray like Roundup, and the wind is blowing, is that a good idea? No. Because, you know, all those plants that you want to keep are probably going to. And one of the places I volunteer is the Big Red Barn Garden. And you're going to hear a little bit more about it later. Our POC from there is Janice Noble, who's going to share some information about the garden and volunteer opportunities. But a few years ago, the county was spraying herbicide along the edge of Cordova Road, which is the road that runs right by the garden. And guess what happened to our plants that year? We did not do well. They did not produce well. Some of them died. Some of them just had stunted growth and did not produce well, but it was because of the spray. So, you know, think about not only your area, but your neighbors as well. Be a little, so environmental conditions, really important. All right. So, again, damaging non-target plants. And that's going to make it particularly difficult to use an herbicide if you have small little weeds and all the stuff that you want growing. You know, now it doesn't say you can't, particularly, for example, if you have shrubs or something and they are dormant and they're woody stemmed, then you can use an herbicide on little weeds that are growing in the soil. Make sure you are doing it, because it's not going to, now if you sprayed it directly on the wood, the woody stems and stuff, yes, it would damage it. But if I can spray herbicide in my rose bed, for example, in the wintertime, if the roses are dormant and I'm doing it really close and there's no wind. Does that make sense? Now, I know we had a hard freeze or two, but you know, my roses didn't go dormant this year. So, yeah, they got pruned this last weekend, so. The other thing to keep in mind is toxicity. I can talk, I used to do this professionally. To human beings. Some things really are harmful to human beings. That's why reading the label is so very important. If it says wear a mask, wear a mask. And then there are certain things that you won't be able to get. It'll say the ideal thing to use for this would be this, except you're going to have to go get a licensed person who can handle that chemical because you can't get it. All right.
Hey, if I can interject something, you know, when you talk about herbicides, and the young lady up front said, read the directions. You know, we're a society that want instant results.
Yeah, oh yeah, Tim's right.
Just like if you're washing dishes by hand in your house, what do? You use more and more and more Dawn because you think it's going to do a better job. Herbicides are just kind of like Dawn soap. You read the directions and you have to spray and you have to sit back and wait. And some of your directions may say it needs to be watered before you put down the herbicide, prepare the soil. Then you spray, and then it may tell you not to water for a week or something of that nature.
Read the directions.
But herbicides can be very, very, very dangerous in a lot of avenues, as Kay is saying. So please read the directions.
And don't
not over mix herbicides, just like using too much Dawn soap in your sink.
Yeah. Okay, so formulation, and these are just some terms that when you're reading the directions, you will see. One is sprayable. That means exactly what it sounds like. You can put it in a sprayer and spray it. It is going to have the proportions, like how much of the herbicide versus how much water do I use. Some of it will come pre-mixed, and you don't actually add water. The other thing is the active ingredient. That is, what's the killing agent? Okay, what is it that's in there that's going to do harm to the plant? And then there are inert ingredients. Those are just carriers. You need this much of the active ingredient, and it will kill hundreds of plants. So you got to break it down and to make it go someplace. Adjuvants, now say that 3 times really fast. These are additions. I don't know why they can't just say additions. This is kind of like medicine in that, I think that they have contests at pharmaceutical companies to see who can come up with the most unpronounceable name, a term to call a medication. I really do. Just like I think in medical school, they have special classes for medical students to teach them how to write illegibly. Okay, these are additions, and they will help. They're not the killing agent. They help make it more effective. One is where they have surfactants. I like that one too. That just means it makes it stick. If you're mixing your own, sometimes it will say use Dawn, for example. or something, that will stick to the leaves, okay? Anti-foaming, it means that your stuff's not going to foam up when you put the water in to mix it up. So just different things that they add to make it a little more effective.
Actually, it makes it easier is if you use the dyes, like when we spray for remedy for mosquitoes.
Mhm.
And if you there's a blue dye that goes into
You can.
some of it.
You can. That way you can see the coverage that you've got. Volume of spray. In other words, how much should you mix up per ounce or whatever, and what kind of coverage do you need? So, that's called gallonage. The label is the law. Now, if you do not follow the label in terms of mixing and application, and you get ill, you ain't got a leg to stand on in court. If you follow the label and you get ill, you know, that's a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, which is about the same as suing McDonald's for hot coffee. But I still think, how many years has that been? And I still think it's one of the most ridiculous things I ever heard of. For those of you, how many don't know what I'm talking about? Years ago, lady got hot coffee at McDonald's at the drive-thru, spilled it on herself, and sued them because the coffee was hot.
And won.
I mean, yeah. Okay. So, integrated weed management. Guess you guys haven't had your insect class yet. Interesting, you'll like it. But they'll talk about a concept called IPM, Integrated Pest Management, where you use a number of different methodologies to deal with pests that you do not want on your plants. This is a similar kind of thing. Use different things. One thing may not work. So, you combine preventive medicine. Sometimes you will hoe and you'll spray because you never get it all up, right? Sometimes you'll use preventive, we'll just keep it out of here. That's one of the things mulch does. It helps keep it out of here. And then make sure that you're not doing something that makes the situation worse, which it can sometimes. Thank you. All right. They're just a plant that's someplace you don't want them. I don't know. I hear it buzzing like it's trying to do it, and it doesn't do it. That's my end of my presentation. Do you have any additional questions? Guys, you've been great. Good questions. And if you have any questions at all, you can ask Paul. He knows everything. Actually, Paul and Tim, and April for that matter, everything they know I taught them. It's been a pleasure.